Hey. Hi, friends. Well, you are right on time because I also took forever. Hello, everybody. Are most of you on Twitch? I'm supposedly live on YouTube also. I have to pop that out, actually. That chat, just in case, because I don't know where chat is around here. So, friends. Oh, God. Well, you are right on time. Mute. Okay. I'm going to pop out the chat. Thank you for being patient. There we go. Just in case. Okay. Hello, friends. Happy Halloween. I'm Team Rocket. And these were the gloves I couldn't get on. It was hard. I'm not used to it. But I think we should bring gloves back, you know? We should be classy. Okay. Hello, chat. How's everyone doing? How has your Halloween been? Sigrid, you still didn't tell me. Oh, yeah, you did. It was sour. It was some sort of sour string. Yes? Let's go ahead and pull up our show. Let's pull up our show. Skittles too? I'm jealous. I'm on strict no good shit. It's like a horrible time of year to be trying to get rid of Candida. Alright. We're gonna skip that. Okay, you guys are gonna have to let me know how the audio is. I'm gonna turn it up. And hopefully that's not too loud, okay? Don't forget to tell me.
You're listening to the Astrology Podcast. Joining me today is astrologer Austin Kopic, and we're going to be talking about the astrology of November 2024 in this episode. Hey, Austin, thanks for joining me.
Hey, Chris.
Hey, all right. So in the first half of this episode, we're going to spend about an hour talking about news and events that have occurred since our last forecast a month ago and the astrological correlations that coincided with those news events. Then in the second hour of this episode, we're going to jump into the forecast for November and do a deep dive into the astrology of the next 4 weeks. So as always, there's going to be timestamps in the description below this video on YouTube or on the podcast website if you want to jump ahead to the forecast section. But otherwise,
I feel like
yeah,
things
get
just kind
ready
of changed
for some news
after
and
the baby
events.
came.
So before we jump into the news, I wanted to do just a quick...
Every time Austin came back, it was like, oh, Austin, you just had a baby. Hey, Jendi from YouTube, happy Halloween. It's like, oh, he looks like he just had a baby. With all the love and respect. That's what he looks like.
Overview to give you a preview of the astrology of November and what we're going to be talking about later in this episode. So here is the planetary movements calendar that shows where the planets will start at the beginning of the month and how far through the signs of the zodiac they'll get by the end of the month. And then this is the planetary alignments calendar, which shows the major astrological dates and alignments over the course of the next 4 weeks. So at the top of the month, we start with a new moon in the sign of Scorpio on November 1st. Then on the 2nd, Mercury moves into the sign of Sagittarius. On the 3rd, we get a Venus-Jupiter opposition that goes exact the same day that there's a Mars-Pluto opposition that goes exact. And then later on that same day, Mars actually moves into the sign of Leo, where it's going to stay for the next couple of months because it's going to go retrograde in that sign starting in December.
Woohoo!
The following week of November, we get Venus moving from Sagittarius into Capricorn on the 11th of the month. Then we get our second lunation of the month on the 15th, which is a full moon in the sign of Taurus, which occurs the same day that Saturn stations direct in the sign of Pisces. The following day, the sun opposes Uranus in Taurus. Then on the 19th of November, Pluto departs from...
Hey, can I pause this and be hella annoying and just pause it again? Will you guys tell me if you want me to speed up his voice? Because usually when I watch these, I put it on 1.25, but I don't want to do that. I don't want to bore people by the normal, you know? I don't know if everyone speeds up the voice, if anyone has an opinion, put it in chat. Otherwise, I am going to just speed it up a little bit because just a little, you know? Hee hee.
A decade-long trip through Capricorn
Cool.
and moves into Aquarius for the next 20 years.
Yay!
2 days after that, Sagittarius season begins
okay,
with
good.
the Sun
Yes,
moving into Sagittarius on the 21st, and then finally Mercury stations retrograde in Sagittarius on the 25th and begins a 3-week retrograde period. So those are some of the major highlights of the month. Here's the planetary transits calendar that Madeline Decotes of honeycomb.co made for us in order to visualize some of the major aspects happening this month, such as the Mars-Pluto opposition, the Venus-Jupiter opposition, and other aspects. Here is the Mars retrograde graphic that Madeline also made, which helps us to visualize some of the major stuff happening this month, primarily the ingress of Mars going into Leo on the 3rd and Mars opposing Pluto the exact same day before it makes that ingress. And then finally, the last graphic is our Mercury retrograde graphic that Madeline came up with this month from honeycomb.co, showing Mercury entering its pre-retrograde shadow period already on November 7th, immediately after Election Day, before building up to the actual retrograde period, which begins on November 25th and doesn't end until December 15th.
Astrology going sicko mode. I swear.
All right, so those are some of the major alignments we're going to talk about this month. Why don't we jump right into news and events that have happened over the past few weeks and talk about some of those astrological correlations. There's been...
Okay, I'm pausing for the bet, okay? So we know that Austin dips, usually, during the show. And I think that every time we notice him spit into a cup or notice it in his lip, we should drink or smoke or bingo. Whoever gets bingo first or whatever. We need to be keeping track because that shit's hilarious to me.
A ton of stuff because, of course, early last month, in the first half of the month, we had the second leg of eclipse season where we had an eclipse that occurred in Pisces in the previous month and at the end of September. And then there was an eclipse that occurred in the sign of Libra at the very beginning of October. And there were many different news stories that really focused on that eclipse around that time. So the first news story, of course, was there were some major events that happened between Israel, Lebanon, and Iran. And we had anticipated that this eclipse season, especially the Libra eclipse, would be the next phase or the next installment of the continuing saga between especially those countries in the Middle East. And indeed, right on pretty much on the eclipse within 24 hours, on October 1st, Israel invaded Lebanon and began a ground war. And this occurred right before the eclipse occurred in Libra on October 2nd. So this had been preceded exactly 2 weeks earlier on the previous eclipse, which occurred on September 17th by the pager attack, which occurred when hundreds or thousands of pagers were exploded in Lebanon, which then acted as a precursor. So again, we've seen events lining up extremely closely in terms of different things that's happening there, especially in terms of Israel and some of the different steps that have been taken in different turning points. Also the same day on October 1st, Iran launched missiles at Israel, reportedly in retaliation for some assassinations that had occurred over the previous few months. So it ended up being like a major day when a bunch of stuff was happening, all centered right on that Libra eclipse. Mm-hmm. So that made a lot of, sense in terms of us having expected a continuation and an important turning point, and then really seeing some major developments happening, I think, right?
And I'm not gonna lie, I felt that in my life, in my personal life. It was a big one. I wonder if the other cardinal angles agree with me.
Yeah, well, we saw we saw this set of situations emerge last October when we had a Libra solar eclipse, and that's when this round of hostilities got going. And then we saw things, we saw, for lack of better language, the next episode or installment 6 months later during that set of eclipses. And shortly after the attacks and retaliations last year, we both looked into the history. And we'd found that every time there were eclipses, especially the South Node, every time there were eclipses in Libra and Aries, especially with the North Node in Aries and the South Node in Libra, there was another round of deadly hostilities between Israel and neighbors. And so based on the history, we'd expect at every round of these eclipses, beginning with the ones this spring and then continuing with the eclipse, the set of eclipses we just experienced over the last month, to bring more of this and to tell that terrible story.
Yeah, for sure, especially with the birth chart of Israel having Libra rising, and with the current leader of Israel, Netanyahu, having a Libra stellium and being born on the day of a Libra eclipse. So, and earlier this year, we had noted that on one of these two eclipses, I think was it the Aries eclipse, that ended up being the first time that Iran directly launched missiles at Israel. So this second set of eclipses, where again there was this open launching of missiles between the two countries, ended up being a striking connection astrologically between those dates 6 months ago, earlier this year, that coincided with eclipses, and then the ones this month that also coincided with eclipses.
Yeah, yeah. There's been too much stuff to go over here right now. The solar eclipse the solar eclipse in April also set the stage
I
for
see it in his
the
lip.
sudden
Just saying.
disappearance of several members of top-level Iranian leadership in the helicopter crash, which has not been linked directly to the hostilities, but still plays into the story regardless.
Yeah, for sure. And so speaking of that, then this month on the full moon, very close to the full moon, there was like a really difficult full moon in Aries that we talked about in the middle of October. Israel killed the leader of Hamas at that
This is
time,
the
and he
scariest
was said to
movie,
have been the
honestly.
architect of the October 7th attacks. And it was striking because this was the first full moon that was not an eclipse in the sign of Aries in over a year now. And it wasn't just that full moon, but also there was the appearance of a comet at that time.
Hi,
And I had talked
Nicholas.
about this a comet in the year ahead forecast because in ancient astrology, a lot of the texts that talk about
Hi,
comets are
Gabe.
very foreboding
Hi,
because they talk
Hal.
about like world
Hi,
leaders dying
Cookies.
and important people dying and things like that. And I thought there was a striking
Classy
coincidence
oranges.
between the greatest visibility of this comet and then the leader of Hamas being killed or being assassinated at that time, in terms of just like world events and prominent people and some of those ancient astrological principles or concepts still being relevant today.
Yeah, for sure. And we also sort of muddying the waters or just sort of densifying the omens. We also had a comet during eclipse season in the spring as well.
The
Right.
comets.
Yeah, that's true. All right.
The
So other
omens.
things that happened in terms of that
The
on
omens.
the 25th of this month of October, just a few days ago, Israel struck back at Iran, and there just keeps being this tit for tat that keeps going back and forth and seems to be like escalating
Tit for
every time
tat.
we go into one of these
That's what
new
we're calling it.
periods. So the next set of eclipses is going to occur in about 6 months in March and early April, and we'd expect another major turning point and continuation of some of these events at that point. And actually, it continues to escalate so much, especially when Aries keeps getting activated,
Takes one
not
to know
just the
one,
Libra sign, but also
Nicholas.
Aries, that there's a ton of stuff happening in Aries next month, which is actually starting to make me very nervous because it seems to heighten the possibility of further escalation, where we're going to have Venus going retrograde in Aries next spring, early next year. We're going to have Saturn and Neptune moving into Aries. We're going to have one
Chris's
last Aries
nightmare.
eclipse take place around that.
This is an inside joke between me and my community. Anytime Chris brings up anything going into Aries, especially Saturn and Neptune, it's always like, this is the end for astrologers. And so anytime he brings it up, we have to drink or smoke. So everybody's going to be hammered
That
by the end
time.
of this.
And it seems like, especially Israel keeps responding to Libra transits, and Iran keeps responding sometimes to Aries transits. So that's one of the things we'll be paying attention to early next year.
Yeah, well,
Not saying it's
one of the
wrong.
charts that's used for modern Iran
We are so cooked.
has the sun in Aries and a Leo rising. And so all of the Aries stuff would be on Iran's Aries sun, which is also the ruler of the rising, which is that things in Aries keep triggering events for Iran suggests that that chart's pretty useful.
Hi,
And then I guess
Ruby.
to concerns about uh, mm, yeah March April next year, the Aries ingress chart, which is a tool used for mundane calculation like what will
Very
happen to
true,
this nation,
Nicholas.
for Iran next year has Mars conjunct the degree of the rising, which is a very strong indicator of not peace.
Stoked.
For there,
Let's
I couldn't
fucking
find too many
go.
precedents because modern Iran, like post-revolution Iran, it's literally about, I think it's 3 weeks older, or excuse me, 3 weeks younger than I am. It's 79. It's spring of 79. But the year that the that Iraq invaded Iran, Mars was also on the rising that time in Leo, the rising of the Aries
I'm
Ingress
so
chart.
glad you're here
And
too,
so,
Ruby.
yeah, there are a number of
Nicholas,
eyebrow.
he is shook.
There are a number. There are two eyebrows, and they're mine,
Relatively.
and they're permanently raised
Regularly.
about that region, especially Iran, coming into next spring.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll be paying attention to that. All right, so moving on to their major news stories that happened. I mentioned this already, but a comet became visible in the middle of the sky over the course of the middle of the month, especially. And I found some pictures on Wikipedia that
Wow.
different people took of the comet around the world, and it actually became visible to the naked eye. Some of
That's
these were
crazy,
taken with
dog.
like advanced photography, especially like time lapses and stuff. But there's a number of people, especially outside of like major cities, that could actually look up and see
Did
the
anyone see
comet,
that?
which was just to the right of Venus, which is a very bright star at this point because it has some distance from the sun. Um, yeah, so did you get, I didn't get to see it. I was like in the middle of downtown Denver. I looked for it a couple of nights. It was
I
cloudy,
didn't see
too many
shit.
nights. And the two that I did
Also, I
look
don't go
for it, I didn't see
outside.
it. And I wish, realized in retrospect, I wished I had like gone outside of town and gone to the mountains or something, and I probably could have seen it. Did you see it?
No, our visibility is terrible in the west. We've got earth and rocks and trees obstructing
We
the
have a bunch
view.
of dirt in the
Mm,
way,
yeah,
so yeah.
that is a bummer. Well, if anybody did see
What a
it,
bummer.
let us know in the
Bummer.
comments like what it looked like or what your sort of feeling was that was invoked by it. It's interesting that we've had so many different visual phenomenon this year that have been visible to the naked eye, like that major eclipse that went across the US in April. We've had like
We
auroras and
need
stuff taking
more
place twice
unhinged
this year. And now we've had two
astrology
comets,
conference
although this one was
elections.
much more visible than the one that happened
We need
earlier
more
this very thing.
chaos, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's been a great year for most people. So I'm sure that all that old comet lore and all the stuff about dire portents in the sky is wrong.
It's
Yeah,
just
well,
wrong.
yeah.
Those are just
It's
like
wrong.
that's like the confetti celebrating things all working out for the best for everybody.
Yeah, I don't know if your sarcasm is going to translate perfectly, but I think I detect some slight sarcasm because yeah, it's been a crazy year. It's been a very notable year, and also there's been some pretty terrible stuff that's happened. And I pulled out a quote from Manilius and a quote from Shakespeare in our 2024 year ahead forecast when I was talking about some of these visible things like comets. I'm just going to pull those out again for a reminder.
Please do, because I
Uh,
have no clue what
so
this is
this is
all about.
Manilius on comets. He says, "Such are the disasters which the glowing comets often proclaim. Death comes with those celestial torches which threaten earth with the blaze of pyres unceasing, since heaven and nature's self are stricken and seem doomed to share men's
Always!
tomb.
Always with
Wars
this
too,
shit!
the fires
Fuck.
portend, and sudden insurrection, and arms uplifted in stealthy treachery. Comets also presage civil discord and strife between kin."
Bro.
And then, of course, Shakespeare has that famous line in the tragedy of Julius Caesar where he says,
Tragedies.
"When beggars die, there are no comets seen. The heavens themselves blaze forth the death of
Always.
princes." So that's obviously a little over the top, but it's like, we've
Nah.
seen some pretty
That's
crazy and
real.
intense stuff this year. And one of the questions we have also is just with this comet having just taken place this month, what that might be indicating that doesn't just coincide precisely with the date of the event in the middle of October, but also if that's like an omen of some of the stuff that we're seeing starting to unfold over the next few months.
Why don't we ever
So
hear about the
the fact that
good
it's like taking place right
omens?
before the U.S.
You know?
election, for example, did
Do
not
those
escape
exist?
me, and I'll be paying attention to what happens in terms of that.
I guess
Certainly.
it's
Well,
just
and
not the
the
time for good
seemingly over the
omens.
top
You know?
Shakespeare quote
Not the time.
that comets portend the death of princes. We've had two this year, and there were high level leadership deaths
You had
during
a
those
chance to
periods,
see it when you were
both
in Park
times.
City, but
And
too busy
then
eating chips.
in between, right, we had a very
That's some
close
real
Cole
Taurus
assassination with a former
rising
U.S.
shit.
president, which hasn't happened
I
since,
approve.
but like,
It's
was
worth
Reagan
it.
shot at in 1980, early 80s? It's been quite some time. So,
Yeah, and
and
we had another president who stepped down and like dropped out of a race unexpectedly, which
right,
also
right,
hasn't
right.
hasn't happened since the 1960s.
Yeah, no, that's yeah, exactly. Right. Like and not a physical death, but a disappearance or removal or absence as a as in yeah. Um worth sort of to add to that, I just wanted to point out that we talked a lot about Mars and Aries and all of the conflicts and the Mars Pluto opposition, which is still growing up until early November. It's quite tight right now, but it was activated by the full moon. And I just wanted to briefly address that in addition to there being escalation in violence between Israel and Lebanon, almost all of our other ongoing conflicts also ramped up a little bit The U.S. The United States used stealth bombers for the first time on Houthi positions, which was there's been some back and forth there, but that was an escalation. It was a busy month of warfare in Ukraine, and we now have North Korean troops showing up to fight for Russia in that conflict, which is another escalation. The Sudanese civil war has intensified. It's actually just yesterday that the UN Secretary General described it as a nightmare.
You're all taking notes, right? You should all be taking notes. If you're not taking notes, you're fired.
Of violence, hunger, disease, and displacement. And although not full-scale war, the Haitian crisis has intensified significantly over the last month, and also described recently by the UN as a spiraling crisis of rampant violence and food insecurity. And so all of that, negative Nelly talk that we did on the podcast last month is reflected very clearly.
I'm down,
in what has
Nicholas.
actually
You'll have
happened.
to teach me.
Yeah. Yeah, the Mars retrograde especially is clearly getting more and more intense, and we're just sort of getting started in terms of some of that. So that's been our
Yeah, can we pause to talk about today just real quick? Happy new moon in Scorpio. It's very close to my ascendant, which I thought was a good omen for doing this. There's a good omen. But it is ruled by this Mars-Pluto opposition that is, to me, it is like psychological warfare for me, because it's in my 3rd and 9th houses, and my brain, dude, I've just been losing my mind. Like all the lobotomies I've been talking about, like that's the lobotomy I'm looking for. Like I am in a deep need of a lobotomy. So maybe over the next 2 weeks I'll get one, since this is a new moon ruled by this lobotomy placement. But yeah, the power dynamics that have been going on for the past 2 weeks for me, not a fan as someone ruled by Mars, with Mars in detriment, just getting fucking railed. Like, I'm surprised. Yeah, my mental state has been mental warfare. So it is a scary movie. Exactly. This is so spooky. It is spooky time. For sure.
balance that we try to find over the past several years, ever since the pandemic, really, which is like,
thank you, Gabe.
when you see difficult stuff coming up,
you.
to what extent do you call it like you see it versus to what extent do you try to
Have
counterbalance
a fun
things
Halloween.
and also point out some of the good things. We're going to run into that as an issue this month, where we've got some favorable configurations like the Venus-Jupiter opposition, but it coincides right at the same time with one of the most unfavorable configurations, which is a Mars-Pluto opposition that goes exact the same day.
They cancel out.
We'll have to once again try to navigate that in terms of calling it like we see it when it comes to this forecast for next month.
I think this month will make it a little bit easier for us. I think there's more balance in this month to describe. I don't think October was terribly well balanced.
Well, I don't know. We'll come back. We'll circle around to that. We'll have that discussion here in a little bit. So let me finish.
Absolutely.
Let me finish off the news. So on October 9th, Hurricane Milton made landfall, and we had the second major hurricane that hit the U.S. During this hurricane season. I thought it was notable that it was this one was right around the time of the Libra eclipse, within a week of it. And
well, it's crisis
with it being
weather.
A Libra eclipse
You're
and
right
an air
on
sign,
time.
one of the headlines I saw was that it created at least 41 tornadoes, which caused deaths in Florida when that hurricane made landfall. So additionally, large parts of the U.S. are still recovering from the previous hurricane, which coincided with the Pisces eclipse, or happened not long after the Pisces eclipse in September. And I was seeing headlines about this that were water related, which I thought was really striking, because we continue to see water themes come up from Saturn and Pisces that actually got accentuated by the first eclipse in the sign of Pisces as well. So one of the headlines on October 16th recently said, the Washington Post said, how Asheville residents survive without running water weeks after Helene. It said it's likely to still be weeks or months before taps in this part of Appalachia become flowing again with clean, potable water. And then I saw another news story that said that there was a major business or a factory that was hit by the first hurricane, by Helene, which created IV fluid bags for hospitals around the United States, and that factory was completely knocked out. And as a result of that, hospitals across the country were bracing for shortages when it came to IV fluids and fluid drips. And I thought that was, again, such a very literal manifestation of Saturn and Pisces, and a lack of fluids, like literally.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that we have that water-based symbolism and also reality coming from Helene, which was right after the eclipse in Pisces, a water sign. And then we had an unprecedented number of tornado warnings and tornado touchdowns after for Milton, which was the eclipse in an air sign. Also, with Milton, there was a lot less rainfall than was expected, and so the majority of the damage was actually done by air. It was done by the wind. There was less water damage than expected. My folks are actually about 10, 15 miles away from where it touched down. So and they're fine, but we were watching that pretty carefully. But yeah, there was more wind damage than expected for the air sign one, and lots of water-based consequences for the water sign one. And it's worth noting that even though the hurricane made landfall on October 9th, it started brewing up and being visible as a hurricane system and raising eyebrows very shortly after the eclipse.
Okay. Yeah, it was really striking just watching it happen live and seeing the unfolding of some of these things in concert with those alignments.
Yeah.
So other eclipse stuff that happened, the vice presidential debate happened on October 1st, and this was within 24 hours of the Libra eclipse. And it was weird because it started with Gemini rising and Mercury was in Libra along with the sun and the moon at that point. So there was a stellium in Libra. And a lot of the comments on what happened with the debate referred to how surprising, like weirdly agreeable both candidates were being throughout the entire debate.
We could definitely
So
pump
some of
up
the
those tornado
keywords I wrote down
numbers
were
for sure.
cordiality, I
41
agree,
is
surprisingly
nothing.
affable, and trying to be affable were like some of the comments people were making afterwards. And also wrote down two Washington Post headlines. The first one said, Walsh, Vance tout opposing views on key issues in composed debate. And then a later headline there said, in civil debate, Vance and Walsh focus more on policy than personal jabs. And there was even one famous political commentator streamer on Twitter who wrote in all caps, stop agreeing. And that was his like immediate reaction to the debate because both of them kept agreeing with each other and finding points of agreement, almost like too much at times when there was points that they actually really disagreed about. But it was so striking seeing that Libra stellium and see that be like the outcome and see that being what people were talking about.
Libras arguing.
Yeah, I actually watched most of that one, and it was like a Twilight Zone episode with a U.S. political focus,
Right.
where it's like that. It was completely out of sync with the tone of the election and any messaging or speech around the election, before, after, or outside of that tiny bubble. It was a very bizarre world.
Or even with their own messaging, because both of them had been attacking each other very strongly for the month or two leading up to that, and then both of them immediately went back to attacking each other within a few days of the debate. But it was weird also because it was kind of like a time machine as well,
I
taking you
see the
back
vision.
like 20 years or 10 or 15 at least before the current era, and just reminding you what debates in the country like used to look like more or less.
Yeah, there was a certain nostalgia to it. Like, what if people always mostly talked about issues? That would be like, do I have memories of that happening, or am I just being too fond of the past? Am I imagining a golden age that never was?
You are a
Right.
Cancer
Or a period of
rising.
either civility or a period of at least like the premise of civility, even if they're actually still saying terrible things about each other, doing weird political scheming, which I guess in reality was probably always happening and really was, I guess, if you think about it.
Sure. Yeah. But yeah, it was notable. It was a notable, like, strange, and that's sometimes, the eclipses sometimes do, they do a variety of dramatic things, but sometimes the drama is that something is very odd, right? Like that debate had the quality of the eye of a hurricane, where 5 minutes previous it sounded like there were, 100 trains driving through your yard, right? And everything's roaring, and then it's quieter than a normal day for a little bit, right? Like
Right.
very odd.
But if you look out on the periphery, there's like a train that's floating in the air that's like about to smash into your house if you just wait like 5 more minutes.
Floating in the air?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Flying
All
trains.
right.
Back to the
So
Future
that was
3.
that. Other things that happened
Let's
in the
go.
news. Jupiter stationed in Gemini on October 9th, and Pluto stationed around the same time in Capricorn for the last time on October 11th. I wrote
Twitch.
down that
I'm
on
on
October
Twitch
10th,
and
within
YouTube.
24 hours
I'm
of
using
the Jupiter station
Streamlabs
and the Pluto station, one,
upgraded
Tesla began
to dual
selling
cast.
humanoid robots for $20,000 to $30,000, and additionally, Elon Musk like announced Tesla's new Cybercab robo-taxi, which is a fully self-driving vehicle with no steering wheel or pedals that's designed to supposedly transform urban transport by providing
Whoa.
uh, on-demand rides, essentially. So
I'm
there was
throwing
some
up in
major
my mouth.
developments taking place potentially in terms of Gemini-related things, which is like travel, especially having to do with cars, especially I was thinking of that in as a preface to next year when we're going to get our first dip of Uranus going into Gemini, which we have been anticipating is going to really revolutionize and shake up the travel industry, especially with respect to cars and short distance travel. So that was notable. And then also there was another event that you mentioned, right, with respect to all of that.
Let's hear it.
Just the rocket
Aussie.
one.
Oh yeah, on the 13th, SpaceX managed to retrieve a huge rocket after launch, which was the first successful demonstration of a concept that had been talked about for a while, which, if it can be replicated, brings down the cost of launching things and people into space tremendously and opens up a lot of new options for humans in space. So it was a big
Oh my
thing
God.
that they were able to successfully do that. Has a lot of implications for the future of space travel or into space travel.
I need to put on my fucking
Right.
glasses.
Yeah,
I
so I
cannot
thought
read
those are
chat.
notable because it was just like two travel things that were happening around the same time in the same
But I
time
don't want
frame. Um, so yeah, we'll see where that goes in the future. Next major headline on October
I was
11th
gonna say
through
I don't like
there
doing
was one
dishes.
headline on October 11th, but it related to the
I
BRICS
like laundry
summit
though.
where officials started like meeting for a major international meeting in Russia. Um, and there was like a pre-meeting around October 11th, which was very close to the Pluto station on the 13th. And then the actual summit happened about a week later, October 22nd through the 24th, where there was a 3-day summit in Russia that was attended by leaders or representatives from 36 different countries. And the Kremlin said that it was the largest foreign policy event ever held by Russia. And that I have a
Me
quote
neither.
from
I
one news
cannot
source, it
keep
might have been the
clothes
Washington
white.
Post, that said that the summit covered the deepening of financial
This
cooperation, including the
outfit already
development of
has makeup
alternatives
on
to
it.
Western dominated pay systems, efforts to settle regional
Right
conflicts,
there.
and an expansion of the BRICS group of nations.
That's
So
how
we've been talking
fast
about
it
this for the
took.
past several months, but I've been tying that into Pluto and
Yeah.
Capricorn
Agreed,
because
Noel.
those discussions about doing that and those countries trying to push the world off of the dollar and onto a new reserve currency has been ongoing since 2009,
Everybody's so
which was right when
different.
Pluto entered Capricorn.
Everybody's
So I
so
was super
creative.
interested at the fact that there was this summit that was taking place around the time of the final station of Pluto in
Mhm.
Capricorn and the questions of whether that would have long-term implications. And like a lot of the media that I was reading was downplaying it and saying that wasn't a big deal and that it wasn't super successful, but I'm having trouble reconciling that with seeing that Pluto station there and thinking that there actually might be more long-term implications than it might seem at first.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting. We should come back to that. We should remember that this meeting took place in the Pluto station and see whether, from the vantage point of the future, it looks significant. I mean,
Yeah.
I think part of the significance is just that it's what you pointed out and found is just that this effort, like this BRICS project, is very tied to Pluto and Capricorn. Right, it
Mhm.
began right after Pluto decisively entered Capricorn, and
Sorry.
so it may be
Sorry,
that the station
everybody.
is merely
I'm losing my mind.
activating the thing that is tied to it with timing, because the planets also time things that fail or kind of succeed and kind of fail. Right, like they just because the planet's tied to it doesn't mean that it succeeds in its aims. It just means that it moves at that time scale.
Yeah. So we'll have to see, but I wanted to note it here
Mm.
for posterity for the future that I was paying attention to this at the time and how that coincided with Pluto stationing for the very last time in Capricorn. Moving on to other news, you had a story that you were tracking with the dock workers strike, right?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. We had a new crib that we were hoping was going to get delivered, and then we saw that Kate was like, "Oh, there's a dock workers strike," and it was already delayed. It's going to be another month. And then we checked in on it, and the dock workers strike was gone. And so I looked into it, and so there's a massive port strike that began on October 1st, and
Aw,
then was
thank
postponed
you,
on October
Nicholas.
3rd.
We're
And it
definitely
was
doing something.
postponed. It was not resolved.
Timu crib.
And the agreement was
Yeah,
to let the
I'm
current
back in the
contract run
saddle. I'm
out
ready.
on
I'm
January
ready to
15th
talk
and then
about
resume.
astrology.
And so it's interesting because it's relocating the strike
This was my warm up.
From Mars direct in Cancer to Mars retrograde in Cancer. It's kind of same fight, but Mars retrograde or moving forward
We'll
through
do
those
it for
degrees
you,
to Mars moving
Gendy.
backwards. And so that's interesting. I don't know if that was a good re-election. I don't know. October is pretty rough skies. I don't know if that was a good time to talk it out, but the postponed date doesn't look particularly favorable either. It was also interesting to me because it was another weird note of peace, if not a lasting peace, that was struck during the solar eclipse in Libra, right? Because it's announced the first, solar eclipse in Libra on the second, postponed on the third. And so while the solar eclipse in large part did not bring peace to the world, right? Israel invaded Lebanon within a day of that. That was not a strange pocket of peace. That was not an eye of the storm. But we do have these two examples where there was like a strange lull fell over things with the Democratic debate as well, or not Democratic. I guess we're a Democratic country. We're trying to be. So the vice presidential debate, which takes place in a something attempting to be a democracy, which was strangely peaceful. And then you had this, big strike. I believe it was 46,000 dock workers about to go on strike, which, almost everybody would have felt with their deliveries. And it just sort of vanished. They're like, oh, we're not fighting, but we're going to fight later.
Biden went down and negotiated that.
I straight up had a Discord thing about that. We talked about that shit. Right, guys? Right? It was over here somewhere. And it was like, nothing happened. Right? This, right? Is that what we're talking about? I think so. Put the chart up and everything. And it was looking kind of for real. And it was eclipsy. And then Cookies posted this and it was like, they're done. And it was like, oh, okay. Not this time. Not this time, I guess.
And I think probably asked them to postpone it until after the election, and then they did. So whatever was involved in that, or whatever the rationale was that was presented, seemed effective. But that's really notable that you pointed out that Mars will come back and retrograde back to where it was when they revisit it. So that's a great part of your point. Is that's a great demonstration of the idea of shadow periods and how that actually works.
Right. That we've been saying, look at what Mars is doing after it crosses the shadow degrees, which is 17 Cancer up to about 6 Leo. Is the shadow, because Mars is going to come back 2 times to those very same degrees. And so what might seem resolved may in fact need more layers of attention and effort and struggle.
Yeah, totally.
I was legit so pissed when I learned that we were getting the opposition on both axes. Like, can a bitch not get a break? Can the Mars retrograde just be like not nightmare fuel? Like, it could just be a regular. It could just be regular. Like the last time. I think last time it was in Gemini and I had a great time. But no, this has to be this way.
So it's
of course.
So we're looking at the diagram here, and
Mars
here's early October, and Mars enters its shadow right there in early October. Yep. Literally the day that the strike is postponed, the negotiation happens, and then it's supposed to come back, you said, in January?
I believe it's January 15th. That's when the current contracts expire and things need to be renegotiated for the next set of contracts.
So that's like somewhere in here in this range. And Mars, of course, will return to Cancer January 6th.
Yeah. And with that postponement taking place just as Mars entered the shadow, it means that Mars will be back at that same place.
I'm down to do a Mars stream.
For its direct station.
That'll be
and
fun.
We'll sit there.
I can talk about Mars.
And that direct station being in end of February.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I tell people in the pre-retrograde shadow period to be careful about what kind of conflicts you open up, because you may think it's something that comes and passes, but then it could actually come back as like a boomerang and like revisit something you have to revisit in the future.
Indeed.
Yeah. All right. Other news, October 14th,
we need swords,
there's a Washington
we
Post
need
headline
guns,
that said NASA's
we need
Europa
knives.
Clipper launched on a mission to icy Jupiter moon. And they think that Europa probably has a deep ocean and may have the conditions to sustain life. And I thought this was amazing because it was launched on October 14th at 12:06 p.m. in Cape Canaveral, Florida. 21 Sagittarius was rising, which meant that Jupiter was like right on the descendant when they launched this probe to one of Jupiter's moons. And the moon was applying to a conjunction with Saturn and Pisces within about a degree. I just thought that was a hilarious continuation of the ocean themes that we keep seeing and the water themes we keep seeing with Saturn and Pisces. But this time, humans sending a probe to see if there's like life on this ocean moon of Jupiter.
I just wish I gave a shit,
is completely covered with thick ice.
But I don't.
Right,
nice.
the coldness of Saturn, and
we kind of have shit to do on Earth.
Yeah, there's a not terribly good sci-fi horror movie about a manned mission to Europa with like some sort of shadowy creature like hunting the astronauts from beneath the ice.
Nice. What's the name of that?
I don't remember. It was literally not. I haven't thought about it since I watched it like 7 years ago, except for right now. It was fine.
Was that good?
Yeah.
No, it wasn't that good.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I meant. I was
I'm
just
sure you could just Google like Europa sci-fi horror.
Unless I get
calculating
something
the
shiny out of
chart
it, I don't care.
for this, just because I wanted to show it, because I was so impressed by that that moon Saturn conjunction. Look at it. Moon's at 12, 17 Pisces, and Saturn's at 13, 32 Pisces. They're just
That's
forming a nice
disgusting,
little conjunction
guys.
right
That is
there as
exactly
the
squaring
probe
my
is taking
sun.
off for that
Blech.
icy ocean moon.
Yeah. Oh, it's called the Europa
Oh, but
report.
that's okay. They're going.
Okay,
They're
cool.
yeah.
I will
That's
be
fun
really
though.
excited if the probe comes back with like images of giant monsters beneath the surface of Europa. That would be the best news.
Well, that was actually one of the things I noticed is that was the day that the Venus Uranus opposition was going exact. So Venus is at 2612 Scorpio when it launched, and Uranus was at 2631 Taurus. And it would just be funny because we highlighted that as one of our potential like October surprise dates, and it would be funny if that was like a long-term October surprise, where it's like surprise, there's organic life on another, body in our solar system.
Yeah, that would be
Saturn
great.
stationed
Yeah.
exactly
All
square
right.
my sun.
So let's see,
Yeah.
moving on. I don't know if we covered this because I think it was just happening as we were recording the last episode, but there was like a
Or it
major,
will
during
in
eclipse
2
season, there was a
weeks.
major downfall of a prominent figure. In this instance, Mayor Eric Adams became the first sitting mayor of New York City to be indicted on federal charges on September 26th. And this was right in the middle of those two eclipses that was taking place late
I'm
last
Team
month and
Rocket
early
Leader.
this month. So there's not a lot to say about that, just that it was another example of that we keep seeing over and over of like prominent people falling or this pivot point where sometimes there's people falling and other times there's people dramatically rising into visibility around the time of eclipses.
Yeah, it's the whole eclipses, dragons, Game of Thrones. Like when you play the Game of Thrones, you win or
Exactly.
die, or you win or are publicly humiliated.
Right. Yeah.
Oh.
So speaking of that, there's a continuation of one eclipse story from last year that was just kind of bizarre, even though it's not huge world news, but I wanted to note it. A doctor was
Okay. While he tells the story, I'm gonna feed my dogs because they're starving and it's their food time. Okay. Forgive me while I walk around.
charged and pled guilty on October 2nd in the Matthew Perry case, where he basically the doctor who prescribed or gave Matthew Perry ketamine was pled guilty. He was charged and pled guilty. And we remember from like late last year, Matthew Perry was an actor who died the day of an eclipse when he evidently like took ketamine or other things and then drowned in his hot tub. And it was kind of like a shocking death at the time that occurred exactly the day of an eclipse. And then weirdly, the eclipse theme continues even afterwards with the doctor who prescribed that to him pleading guilty literally the day of the eclipse on October 2nd.
Yeah, that is interesting. It's also interesting that it was an eclipse on the South Node or K2, because I very I strongly associate and have seen the use of really intense dissociatives like ketamine, indicated by the position of natal K2 / the South Node or from a transit. Um, yeah, those things which give one distance or separate them from themselves and their ego and their body.
Okay.
It's just another instance of that. K2 mean.
Sure. Yeah. So, and then last major news story I noted was just, especially when Jupiter slowed down and stationed in Gemini in the middle of the month, on October 9th, all of a sudden, like the presidential race became the battle of the podcasts. And both candidates started doing a bunch of long form podcasts at that point. Harris did a ton, like within a few days of that station, going on like Howard Stern and Call Her Daddy and like a bunch of other huge podcasts like that. And then Trump also started going on a bunch of huge podcasts, eventually culminating with going on the Joe Rogan podcast in the past few days. But I thought it was really striking how this presidential election with Jupiter and Gemini has like turned into the battle of the podcasts and of, in that way, like non-traditional media taking more of a role in influencing the outcome of the election potentially than in any race prior to this point. There's something incredibly striking about that that's worth thinking about just with Jupiter and Gemini this year, and continues to be a major thing all the way up until the last minute, because now that Trump just went on Joe Rogan, now there's a lot of discussion over the past few days and like high drama about whether Harris will go on the Rogan podcast, and they keep going back and forth negotiating whether it will or won't happen. So it'll be curious to see how that goes in the next few days.
We
Yeah,
talked about that
absolutely.
too.
Absolutely. Sign of the times.
Um, I'm glad I'm leaving my Aries first house perfection year on December 7th. Ooh, that's perfect. Yeah, that's good timing for you, for sure. For sure. Everybody's fed, but we were just talking about... What were we just talking about?
Yeah, for sure. A few days. Negotiating whether it will or won't happen. So it'll be curious to see how that goes in the next few days.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Sign of the times.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so that's pretty much it. So that brings us to the last piece of news, which is just that election day takes place on November 5th. Everybody should vote because it's going to be an extremely close election. And in some areas, only a handful of people are going to decide the course of history,
We are so
especially in swing
cooked.
states where, for example, in 2016, some of the swing states were just incredibly close, where it came down to just thousands of votes in terms of deciding the outcome of the election. So if you'd like to look up more information about voting and your registration, other things like that, there's a couple websites that I've seen passed around. One of them is vote.org, and the other one is iwillvote.com. So I'll put links to those in the description below this video on YouTube and on the
Thank you,
podcast
Chris.
website. And yeah, just encourage everyone to vote in this really important election.
I think you said it well.
All right.
Well said.
All right. Well, I think that's it then for the news section. So why don't we take a little break and then we'll transition to doing the forecast for
because I
November.
wanted to look at...
All right, so before we start with the forecast, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor this month, which is the Northwest Astrological Conference, which is taking place in person and online near Seattle this year, May 22nd through the 26th, 2025.
Put a 1 in the chat.
This is going to be the 41st annual Northwest Astrological Conference. So here's a little graphic showing you some of the speakers at this great conference that's taking place next year. So registration is already open for Norwalk on October 1st. And the earlier you get the tickets, the cheaper it is because they have different cutoff points during the course of the year between now and May, where the ticket price keeps going up. So this year they have more emphasis on the virtual component, where they're going to have a special virtual guest lecture by Richard Tarnas, who's giving a 2.5-hour workshop. There's going to be daily virtual Q&As with Norwalk speakers, as well as an in-person live stream hosted by our friend Nicholas Polomenakis. And
he's in our chat right now.
I'm excited about this online component because I actually attended online last year, and I probably will again this year. Just because they make it so that people that can't attend in person can really get the Norwalk experience and still be kind of like part of the conference in a really fun way. And I'm glad that they're continuing to expand those efforts. For people that can attend, there's going to be a lot of other great lectures and workshops. Lisa Scheim's actually giving a pre-conference workshop on zodiac releasing, I believe, which is going to be an amazing workshop. And then there's a bunch of other speakers this year who have been people that have appeared on the podcast before, including Demetra George, Patrick Watson, Gemini Brett, Adam Ellenboss, Nina Griffin, Laura Nalbandian, Kira Sutherland, Ann Ortili, Ali Alomi, Christopher Renstrom, Sam Reynolds, Bear River, Wendy Stacy, Jen Zart, and many more. So you can check out the full speaker list, including reading through the different lecture descriptions at their website, which is norwalk.net. And I'll post a link to the website in the description below this video or on the podcast website. So it's going to be a really excellent conference this year. It will sell out though. So if you have any intention of attending in person, just know that you should probably get tickets sooner rather than later, just because the past several years it's been so popular because it's one of the only conferences, only big conferences that's still taking place in the US, that it will probably sell out before too long. So make sure you secure your tickets if you plan on attending in person. And for the online attendees, you can sign up at any time, although the price will continue to go up between now and then. So it's best to sign up sooner rather than later.
Yeah, it'd be something ideally you'd get done before Christmas. Even though end of May sounds like a long time from January. The hotel gets booked up, the tickets sell out. Like, your future self would appreciate it if you got it taken care of sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I was actually really annoyed because I signed up at the last minute for the online last year, and it was actually really pricey when I knew if I just signed up a few months earlier, it would have been much cheaper. So this is that time frame that we're in right now before the end of the year. Somebody was asking me, Austin, about like eating around there and what's in walking distance and whether you should get like the meal ticket versus whether people go out. And I was trying to remember, and the one place I know everybody goes to is like there's a really good Thai restaurant that's within walking distance.
That was the first place my mind went.
I don't know shit about that place.
Whose name I can't remember, but I've eaten there every year. I've done a conference, so I don't know, 8, 9 times. And that's not walking distance. That's like around the corner, right? Like that's like 634 feet away from the hotel.
Yeah, I guess the
that's
advice,
like hovering.
It depends on what you can afford, but like sometimes
creepily.
Buying the meal ticket for the banquets is also a good idea because that's where people, like most people go there and then, get seated around the big tables and then there's like social interaction and stuff with that. And sometimes if it's your first
Do you
conference, that can be a good way to like
mind,
meet new people
Nicholas?
as well. And also it's like nice to have the option to
I
do
do.
that. And then you have the option if you want to go out with people, you can and just give away
Not
your
a
ticket
lot,
versus if you don't buy it
but
ahead of
I
time and you go
leave.
there and you suddenly like want to sit at the banquet table with people, you can't if you don't have a ticket ahead of time.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I try to give myself the option to banquet, unless, and then I stay open to the to being seduced into a better situation.
He's
Right?
full of
It has
shit.
to be better than the banquet to not eat at the banquet. And someone pointed out in the comments that the hotel restaurant isn't bad. The hotel restaurant
Nice.
got way better at some point in the last couple years because I remember eating there this year and thinking like this is so much better than any memory I have of this. And I have a lot of memories.
To
So
me,
kudos to
the
whoever
menu
like
looked mid.
redesigned the menu and got the kitchen in order.
For sure. For sure. Aaron in the live chat says there's a few good restaurants over by the
The
half price
fries.
books there, so that's good to know. All right, yeah. So find out more information at norwac.net, and yeah, otherwise we'll hear how the conference goes next year. Cool. All right, let's transition into talking about the forecast for next month, for the month of November. Maybe I should put up the planetary alignments again, just as
Yes.
a little
Please.
glance at what we're
Visual.
looking at here, a little quick overview.
I'm gonna fill up my
Um,
water. BRB.
so, right away, the two big things are there's several big things, but the big thing is that there's the Mars-Pluto opposition at the beginning of the month on like the 3rd, and then there's the Mercury retrograde at the end of the month starting on the 25th. Although it's tricky because the Mercury retrograde shadow already starts like earlier on the 7th. So those are some of the primary things to talk about. Why don't we start with the lunation, though, the very first lunation, which
I just can't believe that we still have 3 more days of the Mars Pluto opposition. I feel like I've been hearing about this for like 4 weeks straight and like feeling it also. And we still have 3 more days. And we still have 3 more days of it. It's not even over today.
is the Scorpio lunation, because I feel like that first lunation really bakes in the two main oppositions this
Bake it
month right
in.
away to the
Yes.
start of the month, especially for that 2 week period that lunation is active from basically like the 1st of November into the rest of the month. So I'm going to pull up a chart here for those watching the video version.
Tuna's about
where
to
you can
fucking
see
ruin everything, you guys.
the new
she's
moon that takes
eyeing
place
the
on
keyboard.
November 1st, right at 9 degrees of Scorpio.
Let's see. Whoops.
And right away, we can see the two primary oppositions that are fully formed at that point, basically. One of them is the much more positive and like optimistic and hopeful looking Venus-Jupiter opposition, where already on the 1st, Venus is at 17 degrees of Sagittarius and it's applying to an opposition with Jupiter at 20 degrees of Gemini. That's really one of our more positive aspects this month is that opposition, but it's forming at the same time as this much more challenging and difficult and kind of like anger, conflict, fear-oriented opposition between Mars and Pluto, where Mars is at 29 Cancer already on the 1st, and it's applying to an opposition with Pluto at 29 degrees of Capricorn. And both of these two oppositions culminate on November 3rd, just 2 days after this lunation. So that's going to be our initial signature for this month.
So, like, us mutables might be having a little bit better of a time than those of us that are more cardinal or fixed. And if you have all 3, you're in for it all. How fun is that?
Yeah, and such a study in contrast. And whether you're getting the double benefic
No.
Venus
Just
Jupiter
no.
results or the like fear, anger, and shadows Mars Pluto, very much a function of like how your chart is aligned, right? Like this is basically very nice for mutable planets, especially mutable planets later in the sign, and very rough for planets that are late cardinal. And so they're both of these are being handed out, but not equally. And the two axes of opposition don't really aspect each other. They're not really connected. Like the double good and the double bad are doing separate things, right? They're not able to, like, the bad is not able to corrupt or destroy the good, and the pleasant and the good is not able to ameliorate, remedy, or interfere with the bad. And so we've just got both of those happening.
We have so much Gemini energy in the chat.
Right.
It's
like it's just
amazing.
happening simultaneously, and it's very, even though it's like an obvious call, but it's very reminiscent of just like obviously at the start of the month, whatever the results are, there's going to be one half of the population that's extremely overjoyed and like hopeful and exuberant, and there's going to be one half of the population that's extremely angry and
That's what I was saying.
frustrated and depressed and pessimistic. Yeah,
Yeah.
fearful. Exactly. And I was watching a political commentator on like PBS or something yesterday, and they were talking about how the primary motivators in politics are these four emotions of, on the one hand, enthusiasm and hope, and on the other hand, anger and fear. And this was in a completely non-astrological context, but I was really fascinated by that and that reflection and just how that, coincides with some of our primary meanings of the two benefics, Venus and Jupiter, and the two malefics, Mars and Saturn. Especially like Mars is literally anger and Saturn is fear. Are like literally our primary keywords for those two planets.
Sometimes
Yeah,
astrology
and
feels
consistent
like
in text for
English
thousands of years.
class when you're
Right.
reading
Right.
a
It's
Yeah.
not like
book
it's not like somebody just associated anger
and
with
finding
Mars 20
patterns.
years ago or fear with Saturn 100 years ago. Like our very earliest strata of texts have those delineations anchored to those planets.
Blown
Right.
out is such a good
Yeah,
word
so
for
it's like you
for
get
it.
both of those right at the beginning of the
Sparkles.
month. And I think for people in general, especially as you're saying, people that have personal planets close to those degrees, there's going to be one side of that axis that you're going to could be feeling more or less, especially as it personally pertains to you. And that was one of the things that we're going to focus on during the course of this episode is just trying to talk about what the astrology itself is saying as much as we can, even though we know the election is going on and we have to contextualize it in that context, but also in terms of people's personal experience of it, but also in terms of us trying to just like describe what the astrology is saying as clearly as we can on its own terms.
Yeah, we're going to try to do that. We've been trying to do that. It's
There's this dip.
when we were
Everyone
talking about
smoke.
this yesterday,
Everyone drink.
I paralleled it to flying on instruments because it's so windy and visually disruptive that you're not only not getting information by looking out the window, you may get a false impression of, your altitude or speed by looking out the window. And so, yeah, I think, given how high the winds are, it's definitely time to try to fly on instruments astrologically.
Right. And flying on instruments here would be just like looking at the aspects and trying to give keywords for those. And then that's going to be the most striking thing once everything actually plays out. So let's give some keywords on the one hand for the Venus Jupiter opposition that's happening at the beginning of the month. So I said like hope, optimism, um, feelings of
What a
like growth
Christmas
and
present,
expansion,
Sparkles.
especially because it's happening in like Gemini and Sagittarius. Also, ideas of like movement as part of that notion of expansion, I think are really prominent themes when it comes to that axis.
Yeah, I
Oh,
agree.
hell yeah.
Yeah, enthusiasm. Yeah, Jupiter
Slay.
gives enthusiasm and hope.
Slay.
The two benefics together give like reward, feelings of victory or like triumph after a great struggle, right? Like the peace of the peace of having won after having participated in a great contest. And yeah, with Venus and Sagittarius, like Venus in fire signs in general just gives a lot of exuberance, right? And I think Sagittarius may be the most exuberant of the fire signs. People can weigh in, but it's certainly it certainly is exuberant, if not the most exuberant. And so yeah, there's
I
a lot
mean,
of
as
being
a
ready to celebrate. Oh yeah,
as a
you're Venus. Yeah, go ahead.
as a Venus and Sagittarius, I mean, I'm known for being very exuberant. So I think that confirms what you're saying there.
Well, I would argue that it's in your 11th house and that you have a very exuberant audience or fan base, and that you
That's
you have
true.
outsourced that, as that is not the ruler of the ascendant or sect light.
That's
But
true. I
but
do.
exuberance is present in the native's life.
That's fair. I do import that exuberance into my life. That's a good point. So yeah, that Venus transit through Sagittarius, it has reception with Jupiter, so it's trying to empower Jupiter a little bit. Jupiter is retrograde in Gemini, so sometimes the downside of like Jupiter in Gemini can be an overabundance of like words and communication and getting like oversaturated with too much talking, too much communication like taking place at that point. Maybe that's like everybody like reaching their limit, just in terms of like the end of this and just how many words and how much information is being like thrown at you constantly and hitting a breaking point in terms of that.
Yeah, another Jupiter and Gemini retrograde thing might be
I
over
needed a
being
bowl of nuts.
one's enthusiasm being over reliant on a particular pole taken at a particular time. Like the with Jupiter gets in trouble in Mercury's domain in Gemini by putting too much credence or belief into one set of figures or numbers.
Okay. Yeah, and oppositions, this one of the things with this opposition, but also the other one that we'll talk about in a minute, that oppositions oftentimes manifest externally through other people, because you have that like first house, seventh house relationship, and because when an opposition is taking place, it means that when one
I know I was walking away for that part, but Don't you guys just love when they bicker? I love when they bicker. It's so cute. The little tension. I'm just like, kiss. Now kiss. I know you want to. Now kiss.
One planet is rising, another planet is setting over the descendant during the course of that like time period when those two planets are in opposition. So one of them, in order for one of them to become visible by rising, the other one has to become invisible by setting at that time. So you get a lot of stuff that comes out in terms of interpersonal relationships and both the good things that come about as a result of that when you have two people that are raising each other up, and you have the themes of people helping each other out in different ways and having a mutually beneficial or positive interaction with another person or with like a group of people. But sometimes you can have feelings of going like overboard when it comes to that, with being hyper social and yeah, sometimes the pitfalls that come along with over socializing.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's also the sort of I guess with downside for both benefics in this configuration.
I'm sorry, are you trying to tell a party girl that there's a downside to too much of that? They didn't happen to talk about what the downsides were, though, did they? It's almost like they're not party girls, but they're like LinkedIn businessmen that don't understand the sleigh.
Like mutual admiration societies, where I'm only going to say nice things to you and you're only going to say nice things to me. And that's pleasant, but doesn't necessarily generate a picture of reality that will endure outside of that bubble.
Period.
Right. So that opposition is forming. It's like 2 to 3 degrees away on the new moon on the 1st. And then, like I said, it goes exact at 20 degrees.
I have a meme locked and loaded for after this that I'm going to post in a dump that is called Crash Out Autumn. And that is... I feel like that's what's happening here.
Degrees of Sagittarius and 20 degrees of Gemini on November 3rd. The moon actually swoops through Sagittarius, and Mercury is in Sagittarius. It enters Sagittarius the previous day on the 2nd. So it's really getting emphasized at this point around the time of this opposition. And I think November 3rd is going to be a crucial date that I really wanted to emphasize, both because...
Okay, do we have any predictions? I know that anything could happen, but like, I'm thinking like your life, like personal wise, November 3rd, do you have any predictions on what the transit could mean for you? I mean, we all are feeling the hint already. We've been feeling this vibe for at least a week now. And it does depend on which houses, of course. So you know it's your boyfriend's grandpa drama. So that's fun. Oh, hi, Tuna. But yeah, that'll be interesting to see how it actually unfolds in our real lives, along with whatever political nightmare we have to endure.
More positive opposition is really being activated, but also because on the very same day, the most difficult or more difficult opposition is being activated at the same time, which is Mars hitting late 29 degrees of Cancer and opposing Pluto at 29 degrees of Capricorn. So this is an aspect that we've talked a lot about over the course of the past year, because we've been paying attention to those hard aspects between Mars and Pluto and different world events that have been really negative during some of those times. So Mars especially is the planet of like conflict and war and aggression and anger, especially like psychologically, whereas Pluto is the planet of extremes, the planet of taking things too far. It can also be a planet of like control, power plays, and manipulation. And putting these two planets in an opposition where sometimes they manifest as those in those interpersonal relationships as like other people in a person's life can be really tough, because it sets up some really intense conflicts, basically.
Yeah, it sure can. Yeah, we've got a variety of negative dynamics that can form around the Mars-Pluto oppositions. And as Chris said, we've been talking about this one a lot because this is the first of 3 that we're going to get over the next 6 months. But this is the only one that occurs in Cancer and Capricorn, right? So even though it's part of a series, it also has a unique identity because this configuration will not resume in this pair of signs. The other 2 will be in Aquarius and Leo. With one of the things you get from this
that's a little better.
is Pluto. Pluto likes, one of the things Pluto likes to do is to silence or negate, and so Mars does not like being shushed. or negated. And so you get this sort of Pluto attempting to hold Mars down and Mars
Tuna.
getting more and more like irritated and I can't take it anymore. And so which creates, of course, the opposite of silence, right? Like an outburst or like I can't fucking take it anymore. And so you have this sort of like you have
Such a vibe.
this pushing down, like pushing down a basketball into a pool. Like the further down you push it, the second you take your hands off, the more it's going to fly up into the sky. And so there's there's literal tension there. And then when
Aha,
they
there
work
she is.
together, right, we have attempts at warfare or aggressive action or actions taken to win a contest, which is Mars, right? Mars shows up whenever there's a dynamic where there's a winner and a loser. Um, and so we have Mars presiding over conflicts, and then Pluto can also add that sort of shadow realm element to it, where whatever aggressive actions or actions taken to win take place in an area that is not visible, that is behind the threshold of daylight perception, right? So you get sneaky power plays would be a way to abbreviate that. And this is applicable to the world, but we also see this in people's personal lives. And it's important if this is
That's
hitting
me to
your chart
myself
really
in my
closely,
head.
to make sure that you're, as we say, to try to disentangle feelings of powerlessness or being negated or paranoia in relationships from actual toxic dynamics. Because even though Mars Pluto can and will bring about these things or bring those elements to the surface, Pluto also has a way of pulling our focus to a single point to the degree that we can't see other things, and can distort our perception or idea of things, right? Like there may be elements of a relationship that are like that, but it's not the whole thing. But that Mars Pluto brings stuff up.
Yeah,
That
for
was
sure.
kind
And
of nice
sometimes
for
that can be
Austin.
empowering in the sense of
Not
like
gonna lie.
coming into one's power and having to push back against extreme forms of bad things that are happening in your life, whether it be like injustices or whether it be anger or aggression or attempts to manipulate or control you that are happening from external sources or from your circumstances. And sometimes the need to push back against that more vigorously and more assertively than you're used to doing. But sometimes that can be like necessary when you're in extreme circumstances to do that and to step into that. And oftentimes Pluto puts you in situations where you don't have a choice but to do that in some instances, so that it's not even necessarily optional. But
That is
sometimes it's like
taking your power
compulsory.
back.
Yeah,
Taking your
yeah.
power back. Yes.
And just further on kind of working with that, if it's coming up in your chart or life, um, when Pluto is acting as a negative oppressive force by transit or in the nativity, um, the character of Pluto is often it's very Voldemort, he whose name shall not be spoken. And so being able to sort of engaging some of the useful fantasy cliches of being able to name the demon or to identify what it is that is holding you back or holding you down, like that, bringing something into the visible and into the thinkable rather than that sort of
Wow.
murky,
Dendi, yeah.
omnidirectional, oppressive
Sounds like
place
you know the
is
story.
very often a characteristic of working through a Pluto opposition.
More opportunities to
Okay.
take your
Yeah,
power back.
bringing it into light in a sense. So that opposition takes place, and then Mars immediately moves into the sign of Leo after that, where it's going to spend a couple of months. And this is really
Which is
crucial because I think
insane.
this is going to be a huge tone change that takes place on November 3rd. And part of the reason why I think that is that the last two Mars ingresses that have taken place over the past few months have also been massive tonal changes.
We are
One of
so
them
cooked.
occurred when Mars ingressed into Gemini, and right at that time is when Biden stepped down and Harris became the nominee. Harris has Gemini rising, and so Mars moved into her rising sign. And then all of a sudden, there was just this explosion of activity and social media posts and other things surrounding her for pretty much like that month that Mars was moving through Gemini. It was like a very distinctive period. And then eventually Mars changed signs and moved into Cancer. And all of a sudden, we had a much different tone, a much different tonal shift that took place at that point. And that's what we've been in over the course of the past month or two since Mars has been transiting through Cancer. But now we're getting ready for another major tone shift that's going to take place on November 3rd.
Yeah, and one of my favorite things about this month is that from November 3rd, the moment that Mars enters Leo, until I believe it's November 19th, the second that Pluto enters Aquarius, that ongoing Mars-Pluto
Hi,
opposition
Noel. Thank you
is
for
broken
coming.
by the sign boundaries. They're no longer in opposed signs. Sure, they're
Have
still
fun at your function.
they're still opposed
You
by
better
degree,
post a
but
pic
the
of your
signs matter. And so it's
costume.
it's a
I
little
want to
over
see.
2 weeks where that Mars Pluto, like that tension that we just described, is absent,
Dang,
or
Ruby.
has at least
That
has the
sounds a little
volume
more
turned
stressful
down.
than usual.
Which,
But it
one,
also
I look
sounds like it's
forward
right
to on
on
a personal
time, you know?
level, and then two, it's going to be a little eerie because it's coming back. And so in watching events, important events in the world, I'm wondering whether there may not be a lull where things seem like they're going to be fine before the Mars Pluto opposition resumes on the 19th.
Yeah, I mean, there's something that definitely starts happening and
How do the
comes up
young
later in
people
the
do it?
month. And I agree with that from a
They
different
do it
angle
with
because of the Mercury retrograde that
like
starts
this.
when Mercury slows down and stations in Sagittarius, stations retrograde on the 25th. And then we start like a 3 week Mercury retrograde period, of which an important turning point, the Cazimi halfway through on like December 5th, is going to coincide with Mars stationing retrograde in Leo. So, and the shadow period of Mercury, when it actually enters into the degree that it will later retrograde back to, that starts on the 7th. So there's something that starts like building up slowly, like immediately after the election, and then um, starts being revisited because the retrogrades are always oftentimes about looking backwards, about revising something, going back into the past, sometimes like arguing something and just like throwing things up in the air, leading to delays and other things like that. And that's one of the curious things is, in the last election, Mercury stationed on
Is anybody else here listening in a Mercury profection or Mercury ruled or something like that?
election day, and that coincided
Anybody
with
in chat?
it stationed square Saturn, so that coincided with like huge delays in determining like the outcome of the election and things like that, and like counting up the votes or recounting them and different things like that. And while we don't have a station here on election day, we do have Mercury entering its shadow degree immediately after, basically, so that it's setting up something that's going to be revisited a few weeks later.
It's all coming
Yeah,
together.
I would feel much calmer about this election if I didn't know what happened just a couple of weeks later, and that
Right.
it's Mercury having entered the shadow, which will return that degree that it will return to in December, and with the Mars Pluto, the breaking of the Mars Pluto opposition being very temporary,
The
and
way
that
that
it's back not
astrologers
only
know
for one more go, but it's back, and it's back for months, and won't really be done until we get to next spring.
that we're collectively
And
Right.
so
doomed.
I don't know. It's some of that eye of the storm energy that we saw last month. I'm expecting. I don't know. Like I don't know what to expect, but the astrology looks like that for this first part of November.
Okay,
Yeah,
any
and in terms of people's like personal
mutables?
lives,
That'll be
so
fun.
Mercury hits that degree on November 7th, which is 6 degrees of Sagittarius, and
I'm
then
looking
it
at
will
you,
retrograde
Hal.
back to that degree. It'll return back to that degree several weeks later
That's
on
gonna hit
December
your moon.
15th. So it's like if you have a personal planet, especially around 6 degrees of Sagittarius, or even 6 degrees of the other mutable signs, then there's something that's being activated by that initial pass of Mercury at the beginning of November that you're then later going to have to revisit in the middle of December when Mercury comes back to that degree. And then the entire thing is not going to be finished and kind of wrapped up until eventually Mercury departs from its post retrograde shadow period in early January. Mercury hits that final shadow degree January 2nd.
At least
So
it's
there's
only
this
in
just
one
a
sign.
sequence of
I
things like playing
appreciate
out
it
over a
when
several
we
week
don't have to,
period beginning
when it's one
in
thing,
early
you know?
November.
When we don't
Yeah,
have to
and
drag it out
to
over other
speak to that
houses.
opposite, the Mercury Jupiter a little bit more, the Mercury and Sag. The Mercury's time in Sag is going to echo some of the Venus Jupiter, in that Mercury in Sagittarius will also be in a Jupiter ruled sign, but unlike Venus, Mercury and Jupiter will be in each other's signs and exchanging, and so mutual reception, and so that enthusiasm that we were talking about with Jupiter will absolutely be present in the messaging, right? The messaging component, which is Mercury's, and so it really, like, in a on a personal level as well as probably on a collective level. I will be careful about announcing anything too enthusiastically, or signaling my complete and total triumph, right? Like that Mercury Jupiter it's such a good news configuration. And so I would suggest people be just a little wait and see, if you get news that sounds too good to be true, or if you feel like announcing something too good to be true, maybe a little wait and see, because that Mercury's pending retrograde in that condition is just, it promises that. promises some degree of walk back or reversal around like enthusiastic, positive, victorious messages.
Basically, we're washed.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We're washed, chat.
So it's going to be in Sagittarius. Sagittarius, of course, is like the rising sign of the United States. So that's tricky.
So that's
One of the things about the
tricky.
Mercury retrograde, actually,
Yeah.
even though we're getting ahead of ourselves and we're talking about something that happens later in the month with the Mercury retrograde, maybe now is the time to mention this. But I just noticed today that when Mercury stations later in the month, it actually stations square Neptune, which actually complicates that configuration even more and
Wow,
makes
we're
it that
cooked.
retrograde even more annoying than it already was going to be. Because we can see here around November 26th, Mercury stations at 22 Sagittarius, and Neptune, of course, is at 27 degrees of Pisces. So
Oh, but think of
it's
the
like five
art.
degrees off, but that's still pretty close for a square. And that means that part of the Mercury retrograde station is going to be tinged with Neptune. And when Mercury and Neptune get together, there's pretty much always issues of like deception, of misdirection, of
I'm
lying,
thinking
of different things.
Being confused and wrong, like
telling
bad
really good
information, both
stories.
intentional and unintentional.
Really good
Right. But
stories.
sometimes, and in
Really good
Sagittarius, with Mercury and Sagittarius,
adventures.
especially, sometimes being like certain about something, but being like
Yeah.
very confident, but confidently wrong.
Yeah, that's definitely like the big centaur energy with Mercury.
Right.
Just,
Yeah.
centaur style proclaiming, galloping through the town, doing a pole revere, but as a centaur.
And
Spiritual
also,
Somebody make an
psychosis.
AI thing of that, please.
A fucking
but
basically
also
Mercury and
telling a good
Sag will
tale,
have
like Mercury in
psychosis. Spiritual
Sagittarius is
psychosis.
a tale teller and is good at coming up with stories and stuff like that. But because it's opposite to its own domicile in Gemini, which is more of like the reporter, Mercury is in Sagittarius is more of the storyteller. But the details of that are not always actually
It's
very accurate per
embellished,
se. It's more like
but
Yeah.
it's
getting
funner
a
to
feeling
listen
of
to.
something.
Yeah, well, or you can, like, in a sense, all myths are always true, but they are not factual. And confusing the truth of any sort of mythic storyline with the facts of a situation.
Right. Yeah. Um, yeah. I saw a clip of somebody trying to convince someone recently of dragons being true and the question of whether like dragons actually exist versus don't exist and whether the idea of a dragon existing was sufficient to say that it exists.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, it exists in the
Schrodinger's
mind,
dragon?
in a shocking number of places that never talk to each other about it, right? But the existence of, it's interesting. I've thought about that a lot. Like it's interesting that in the Chinese zodiac, dragon is the only creature that's not real, right? Everything
Mm,
else is like, oh, it's a rat, it's a snake, it's a sheep, right? And then dragon, right? And Kate's a dragon, so she gives me shit about having the by far best animal. I'm like, it would be great, that it would be the best animal if it existed. Like I'm a triple sheep in my four pillars, and the what the sheep has over the dragon is that sheep actually exist.
right. Well, and that's the funny thing about like the nodes, for example, being associated with dragons,
Yeah.
but then it's like then you go to like India or somewhere and you see the symbol for the nodes being on the back of a snake's head, and you
Hmm.
realize that that's actually probably the original inspiration, but it sort of gets worked into something bigger, into like a big flying dragon, with scales instead of just a little snake that slithers.
Schrodinger's
Yeah, and magic
dragon.
powers. I mean, they get pretty big, right? Like the king
That's
cobras
what
can be 18 feet
ChatGPT
long,
got for us.
which would feel like a dragon if one slid up to you. But the nodes themselves
Isn't
are
AI
also
just
a huge deal,
crazy?
and yet they don't exist.
Look at that
They're just
technology.
they're calculated points of intersection between Sun,
Schrodinger's
Earth, Moon's
dragon.
orbit, but you can't fly
Bitch.
a rocket up to the
Let's
nodes and
go.
land on them.
How do I
Like they don't
fix it?
exist. But they do. Like, is
Make it
shadow
less
a thing?
bad?
Right?
Right.
Shadow changes things, but you can't grasp shadow. You can't weigh it. You can't land a rocket on it.
Yeah. So anyway, this Mercury station square
Anyway.
Neptune, it sets up a sequence of events that's really important over the next 3 weeks. Because what I noticed is one, at the halfway point in the Mercury retrograde cycle, which is the Cazimi, when Mercury conjoins the Sun at about 14 degrees of Sagittarius on December 5th, that is basically like 24 hours from when Mars stations at 6 degrees of Leo. So the Mercury Cazimi, halfway through that retrograde cycle, coincides.
Does anyone in chat have something at 6 degrees of the fixed signs? Does anyone have any predictions for what's going to happen for them? I think, yeah, Mars will be stationing very close to my midheaven south node conjunction. So that's interesting. What's making me feel less sketched out about it is that it's similar. It's at least in the same sign as last year's Venus retrograde. So I kind of have an idea of what it's going to be about. You're not clueless. You're not clueless. Someone could help you for sure. Drop your chart in the Discord and we can tell you. Yes, all the fixed angles. Exactly. Your moon in Taurus at 3 degrees. Oh, yeah. It's good. Oop, Tuna's here. Oh, okay.
Coincides with the Mars station. And that coincidence means that's going to be a really important turning point around December 6th and 7th. And then weirdly, when Mercury stations direct, and we're getting into December transits here, but when Mercury stations direct around December 15th, it's the same day as a full moon in the sign of Gemini. So I'm really going to be looking for, we're going to end this forecast on a cliffhanger, basically, because the Mercury retrograde that starts building on November 7th and then really gets going later this month on the 25th and 26th retrograde, it's going to set up a sequence of events that's not going to conclude until later in December.
Yeah, that's absolutely the right structure. It's kind of, November kind of feels like a trick because after October's just been building and building towards the U.S. election, but all these other things are beginning more and more intense, and and a lot of that is the Mars-Pluto opposition coming to perfection in early November. We also happen to have the U.S. election there, but actually things kind of de-intensify, and we don't really get like the story we thought we were like the climax we thought we were going to get at the beginning of the month. Whereas the last third of November, I would say starting with the Pluto's reingress into Aquarius.
This one's way
and
better.
Mercury coming up on that station.
Schrodinger's
and
dragon.
December's Mars station right around the corner. That's where
epic
that's where the spectacular, horrifying, exciting story
I might get
stuff
this
is.
tattooed on
me.
me.
I think there's going to be a little bit of a by the end of the first week of the end of the first week of November. It just doesn't look crazy,
pretty.
Whereas the end looks like the crazy we were promised. Do you agree with that, Chris?
I mean, I think that it's true that things are going to ramp up and intensify in a way that's surprising and takes us into a new chapter.
I'm going to make that a meme.
And I do think you're right that there's going to be a little separation between Mars and Pluto once Mars changes signs, but that opposition is still so close on election day. I mean, look at this. Like Mars is at 0 Leo and Pluto's at 29 Capricorn. So even though they have changed signs, it gives some distance until Pluto starts pursuing Mercury later in the month. That's still pretty intense opposition that's going to be experienced. It's not usually until a planet gets like a degree or at least like 2 or 3 degrees away from an exact aspect like that you really start to get a full breather. And I'm not sure that.
I'm not foretelling a great peace settling upon the land for 2 weeks. It's just that it's not the ignition spark climax. Like that's delayed. There's a holding tension between Mars and Pluto, but they're not quite configured. Right, and every day Mars actually gets a little further from
sending
Pluto.
You all the strength.
Not much,
like
not enough to dissolve
sending
the tension.
You all the Mars.
But it's getting a little
Mars,
further from opposition until, of course, it all clicks back in.
For sure,
Thoughts?
yeah, and especially just because that Mars,
Opinions?
we know that Mars
Thoughts?
retrograde
Opinions?
doesn't really start
the
fully
fedora
until
didn't
early
make it
December,
onto
and both candidates
his head.
Have Mars in Leo. So this Mars retrograde that's already like tense and problematic, that has the opposition with Pluto, and where you have these strong conflicting energies, that Mars return to Leo is a Mars return for both candidates, which is just super striking. It's going to be in Trump's rising sign, and it's going to be in Harris's third house of communication. And I was looking back through history. I was trying to look at like other instances of people with Mars and Leo and other things like that. And one of them that I found that was really striking today is I found out that both President Truman and also Emperor Hirohito were both born with Mars in Leo, and they were both born with Mars not long after it had stationed direct in Leo, so just coming off of a Mars retrograde in Leo. And then what's weird is that Mars then went retrograde in Leo and Cancer in late 1945 and early 1946, which was just in the immediate aftermath of World War II. And it was when Japan was still, that fall was like negotiating its surrender, and where Hirohito was pushed into having to make a decree that he was not divine, or that the emperor was no longer a god. And that was such a striking like Mars retrograde for both of those people in Leo and Cancer, and to have that be baked into their birth charts. There's something about that that's very reminiscent here, as we have these two candidates that are about to have the most important event and election of their lives take place, while Mars is getting ready to go retrograde in the natal sign that they were born with it in.
Yeah, yeah. The loser has to renounce their divinity. Um, no, but and there's another piece that makes this retrograde rhyme with that one, which is that at that time, in the mid 40s, Pluto was in Leo, so it was Mars with Pluto in Leo as opposed to Mars opposite Pluto in Leo. But it was Mars Pluto during the retrograde. Um, in that case of the conjunction, the destruction was much more immediate and obvious, right? As that retrograde took place right after Mars was in Gemini and conjoined Uranus, which was the deployment of nuclear weapons by Truman upon the land that Hirohito was emperor of, and that was when the sun.
With that being said, are we all super excited for when Uranus enters Gemini? Because we know what that means. We know what that means.
Was in Leo on Pluto on both their Marses.
Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. That's a good point. Yeah. And then, of course, just coming off of that Mars retrograde later in the spring of 1946, that's when Trump was born, and he was born with Mars just post that Mars retrograde in Leo, just after that Mars
Oh,
retrograde as it was coming out. So he's closely tied in with this specific Mars retrograde period, which is then going to be in his rising sign. Um, yeah. So with both of them, obviously Mars transits can coincide with periods of like
I just
anger,
immediately think of war.
conflict, having altercations, having like fights. Mars is also the classic planet of like war and things like that. And we've been talking a lot about the first Mars-Pluto opposition because it takes place at the beginning of the month, very near to Election Day. But what's unfortunate also, and is a little foreboding, is that the second Mars-Pluto opposition, once Mars goes retrograde in Leo and Pluto moves into Aquarius, is that the second opposition takes place in early January, which is again going to be very close to when they're certifying the votes, basically, when Congress is certifying the votes, which is going to happen on January 6th again. So that immediately seems foreboding in terms of just remembering what happened like 4 years ago and what that looked like.
I wouldn't call it
yeah. I
foreboding.
mean, Mars re-entering
I'd call it
Cancer
kind of like
on January 6th.
cute.
That's what I suppose the fourth anniversary,
It's cute.
or the fourth or the third January 6th after the first one. Um,
Why
we
does
don't
the
wanna see
astrology have
big
to
Mars action on January 6th.
reflect
Right.
it so clearly?
And then we don't get the last Mars Pluto opposition until the end of April.
I know April keeps coming up over and over again, and I do not know why, because I would be shocked, just practically speaking, if there's still stuff from this that's all playing out still by the time of April. But it almost like implies that there's something that's still playing out about all this stuff that starts in like November and December at the beginning of the Mars retrograde and the Mars Pluto oppositions, and that there's something about it that's not finally fully completed until this period in like around April, because it's also
Yep.
around April that both of their charts are getting activated in weird ways. We start having eclipse season again. There's something going on.
Yeah, and March, April is kind of one chaotic unit, right? It's the right Neptune enters Aries, pair of eclipses in Aries
Me
and
too.
Virgo. And there's not only is there a
It's-
Venus retrograde in Aries that comes back into Pisces,
It
Mercury
slays
retrogrades at
when
about
Chris
the same
does that.
time. So we've got Mercury retrograde and Venus retrograde in Aries coming back to Pisces while Neptune's moving in. Like it's a carnival cyclone. And it's very interesting that it's towards the end of that we see the last Mars Pluto. And I think it would be I don't know, smart to 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 acknowledge that there are almost certainly big pieces. There's like some big event or big events that impact all of this that we can't see from here that make this such a long drawn out deal.
Right.
Or I would bet very strongly on something that I don't know and can't see from here, making the astrology look the way it does.
Yes.
Because it's
True.
yeah, it feels like there's a piece missing.
Can we talk
Yeah,
more
for
about
sure.
this?
And just in terms of both of their birth
it
charts,
even-
it's like Mars is
it
going
even
into
has
Trump's rising
Schrodinger's,
sign,
like, it
and
tried,
that's the first
you
house.
know?
So usually the
It
first house
tried.
represents your mind and your character, but also your body and your physical vitality and things like that. Having Mars going into that house then can sometimes cause challenges for both of those things, whether it's in terms of your mind and being more irritated or angry or agitated, or your body. And that's some of the things we've associated with some of the like major health issues that he's had over the past several months with those two attempts, was Uranus squaring his Mars in the first house. around that
which
time.
Uranus is not done doing or until midway through past April of next year. The Uranus is just hanging out in late Taurus. Like that doesn't go away.
Right. So it's like that's some of that energy for him, either psychologically or physically. And then for her, her Mars is natally in the third house of like communication, short distance travel, siblings, neighbors. But Mars going into your third house usually would be just psychologically like arguing, fighting, having to be more verbally combative about something, having to be more assertive or aggressive in terms of your communication style. The third house is short distance travel, and sometimes there can be um, problems that one runs into in terms of traveling. There can be obstacles that come up in terms of travel, but usually
I
from a
fucking
psychological
love
perspective, it's more about
Mars and Gemini. It's one of the
verbal
best Marses,
combativeness for some
bro.
reason.
Yeah, well, and just like little,
Verbal
like lots of little
combativeness
conflicts
is like
scattered throughout
flirting
your regular, like
for
your
Mars
weekly
and Gemini.
schedule. Like things in the third just
It's
are
like teasing
often you just see
and
it
being
becomes
smart.
part of what a person's dealing with on the regular.
Right. How do you feel about Mars and Leo in general as an energy that we're getting ready to have like 2 solid months of, just independent of
Yeah, I
everything
want to hear
else?
this.
Um, yeah, I mean, so there's like every planet that moves from Cancer to Leo, there's a not just a tonal shift, but almost a inversion. Like Cancer is so private and feelings, it's private, and you're just in protecting and cultivating and Mars in Leo or just any planet in Leo, Mars becomes extremely expressive. The Cancer has this inward looking and inward tending towards the private, whereas more in Leo, any planet, but additionally Mars becomes so performative and radiant, right? The energy going outward, like radiating, making a scene, making a spectacle, making a big deal of things. I've seen Mars and Leo be an asset for a lot of performers, right? Who have some artistic skill indicated otherwise, but they have an ability to appear very bombastically, right? Like that's that Mars and Leo. Like it's the solar ability to make an appearance and to get people's attention. And he certainly shouldn't be considered as the only example, but Donald Trump with Leo rising, with Mars on the rising in Leo, is a good example of somebody who makes a big appearance. He was sort of a character for decades, like a public character for decades before
Caricature.
he had anything to do with politics. Like, it's the Mars and Leo is probably more appropriate for a television show host.
Oh, hell
Yeah,
yeah.
showmanship.
Let's
That's like a
fucking
good
Yeah,
go.
that's great.
keyword for Mars and Leo.
Yeah.
And there's some like good versions of that. Like I'm just looking at some Mars and Leo people I see in my files, and we have like Michael J. Fox is a Mars and
One of
Leo.
my favorites.
Um, who else? Mark Hamill, who's like a Mars and Leo, and he played like Luke Skywalker in Star Wars, and that notion of like a hero with 1,000 faces, where you've got
Yeah.
the like hero
Don't
that
bring up Star
has that like
Wars.
long journey
We're
that
gonna
they
start
take.
fighting.
That's a really good example because that's of the Mars being the sun's terrain, because that hero's journey structure is very much a solar journey, right? Like
Right.
that's the solar hero.
Yeah. But
Oh,
then it's
hell
actually
yeah,
surprising how many
Jendy.
politicians there are, even like
Hair
recent
flip.
ones. Like Hillary Clinton was also a
That's
Mars
the
and
good shit.
Leo. And then so is Al Gore. So that's weird that we've had, 2016 was Mars and Leo versus
He's
Mars and
getting
Leo,
better,
and now we've
though.
got a repetition of
A
that
lot
in
better.
2024 with a Mars and Leo versus Mars and Leo, but this time it's different because Mars is about to go station retrograde in Leo right after the election.
I don't know who's
Yep.
keeping him up to date. Like, did
All
someone
right, so
put him on
tone shift,
TikTok?
yeah,
Because there's
more
no way that it's
externalized
just Twitter, right?
as well, less of
Twitter
this like
doesn't,
internal
right?
stuff that we've been doing lately. We talked about like Mars last month. We talked about how Mars in Cancer was like coinciding with like some like weird like nativism and sometimes like turf wars. There's also been like
That's true. I think he does,
racism that we
actually.
noted last month that has for sure continued as a theme in terms of Mars and Cancer, and I've been thinking about that a lot in terms of that as a theme with Mars in Cancer and like why that can sometimes come up. But
Oh, I
then
mean, with it. Oh, go ahead.
go ahead. Go
I
ahead.
was just saying, yeah,
No, you. No,
it's been
you.
creeping up on my late Cancer ascendant,
Mhm.
and so I've been, I've been thinking, I've had to actively fend off like thinking too much about the physical security of the house, because
Mhm.
now that I have baby, the feelings of vulnerability and the need to feel like protected, right? Like to protect your child and wife and self third. I'm like, oh well, there is a bear that lives around here. There is this. Like, what if this happened? Like this kind of thinking of like very like cartoon archetype Cancer stuff. Like, how do I keep my family safe in our house? Has been very invasive, and I did get cans of bear spray. as well as some other things, just to satisfy my mind. Like the bear is not a hallucination. I've seen the bear from 20 feet away. He's very large. He's very shaggy. He has not threatened me. But if he was in a bad mood, I would be in trouble.
That's your primary predator in the wild is bears that you have to look out for.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm sure coyote. Like, there are definitely packs of coyotes
always with
that come in and out of the property. I
quips.
see them. You can hear them yipping and driving the dogs in the area crazy. But like, dude, I'll fight a coyote.
Yeah,
like I'll fuck up some
moon in the
coyotes.
12th,
I'm not gonna
that's
fuck
true.
up a bear.
Yeah,
so true.
I definitely don't want to see that.
But
right.
I was just speaking to the point about like the really intense feelings, especially with it opposite Pluto of, oh my God, am I safe? Is my family safe? Like that is classic Mars in Cancer.
Yeah, the tendency to want to protect that which is familiar and that which is dear to you, and to sometimes identify as a threat that which is different or that which is unknown. And that seems to have been a theme that's come up as like a major thing with Mars and Cancer. That theme is going to actually come back when Mars comes back into Cancer early next year.
I have bear mace too, but it's for hikes.
Which is going to be weird having a
not
return to that.
But I also don't live in the
woods. We're going to get this very splashy 2-month, completely different shift when Mars goes into Leo of a much different energy that's going to be much more similar to like the energy that was happening when Mars was in Gemini the last time it was in diurnal sign, basically, for that 2 months. And things were just happening quickly. Things were happening fast. There was for sure more of a sense of like
I should have a knife,
exuberance or optimism or other things, which is hard to distinguish because obviously some of that was like the Venus-Jupiter sextile.
I just put all my keys in between my fingers, and
some elements of that don't come back a little bit as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, one thing I wanted to speak to was the shift of Mars into Leo, like syncs up really nicely with Mercury moving into Sagittarius. Like it's two things moving from water, which is like private and broody and and deep, to fire.
Yeah, we're gonna dry off that wet blanket
and brings things to the surface, makes them public, goes after things. Like just that tonal shift by itself of those two planets moving into fire signs is going to be significant for the first part of the month. Another way to describe the shift from Cancer to Leo for Mars is it's very much going on offense. Like Mars in Cancer is like literally I was obsessed with defense. I didn't have one thought of tracking down that bear, right, and give him a good talking to. It was all like defense, right?
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point. It's much more proactive, much more go on the attack, much more forward thinking, and more of like shoot first and ask questions later type energy.
Yeah, it's definitely just offense rather than defense. Like when in doubt, act, as opposed to when in doubt, retreat.
Leo is also it's the only fixed fire sign, so it has much more like staying power and much more of a sense of having a permanent sense of that pushing forward, or even that like sometimes burning or irritating notion can be more constant rather than something that just in Cancer as a cardinal sign, it's something that has like an initial push, but then it drops off. Whereas in the fixed signs, it's something that takes longer to get going, but once it does, it has more staying power.
Right, which is going to be kind of an illusion this time. Right, because Mars is going to be gathering fixity and then literally staging a retreat 6 degrees into that sign.
Okay, so maybe it's something that like seems like it's going to have staying power, but then there's like a reversal or having to go back and revisit something from the past.
Right, and then it does go back into Leo, right? And so like there's maybe something of that initial fixity which does endure the entirety of the retrograde. But it's like Mars is doing the opposite of charting a steady course.
Right. All right, so we're back from a little break. Let's transition into talking about the next lunation of the month, which is a new moon that takes place, or sorry, it's a full moon that takes place in the sign of Taurus on the 15th of November. And here that is in the planetary alignments calendar. I think this is a really important lunation this month for one reason, because it takes place the same day that Saturn stations direct at 12 degrees of Pisces.
Yeah, what the fuck is that?
So every one of the Saturn stations so far, ever since Saturn went into Pisces back in early 2023,
what's Saturn's problem?
Has coincided with an intensification of the meaning of Saturn in that sign. And we've seen some pretty important turning points take place with respect to Saturn in Pisces. The first and most notable and like memorable one, of course, was the
I thought Saturn in Pisces would be better because I'm an idiot. I mean, Saturn in Capricorn was horrible because it was my Saturn return and all that other shit, but it was like a good Saturn. And then Saturn in Aquarius I had no problem with. Like an indignity Saturn, I didn't really think about Saturn that much. But yeah, Saturn in Pisces in my 5th house, fucking all my shit up. And being in Pisces makes it a really weird Saturn. But really good stories, which I think he's going to bring up the submarine, the legendary submarine.
The Titan submarine disaster that occurred when Saturn first stationed in Pisces. And we had this like talk for like a week in the media of like fears about being trapped in a submarine. So that's on that one hand, one thing that comes up on that lunation. The other thing, though, is that this is a full moon that is closely conjunct Uranus and has a major Uranian vibe of unpredictability, of disruptions, of things being unstable or even destabilized. Here's that full moon. It goes exact to 24 degrees of Taurus on the 15th.
Real close to Algol,
and we can see that Uranus is at 25 degrees of Taurus. So the next aspect of the moon makes after completing the opposition with the sun is that conjunction with Uranus, making it the primary signature of this lunation. And there's just something surprising. There's some sort of curveball or something unexpected about this full moon that takes place at this point right in the middle of the month.
Yeah, there's some potentially nasty twists that are portended by that. And it is also further, it's also worth noting that Uranus is still on the star Kaput Algol, which has a lot of dire significations. And so the full moon being on Algol would be worth noting in of itself, but it's that same Uranus-Algol combination that that Mars activated in the middle of July. So yeah, definitely curveball full moon. I think a lot of potential to disrupt, as you said, would be a good way to talk about it, which is a little frustrating because usually
next to Uranus,
the full moon in Taurus,
it's
the moon's exaltation, and Taurus is a fixed sign; it's an Earth sign.
With Uranus on Algol,
usually the full moon in Taurus is,
I think it'll be
a
it'll
note
be fun.
Of,
it'll be a great time to go out and drink.
Right, and so this full moon, which is
we should go party
normal job is to be stabilizing, is this year quite destabilizing.
Right. So best case scenario, let's talk about people's personal lives. I mean, a full moon conjunct Uranus, it could be like usually tensions are running high during a full moon. Like, we always hear those anecdotes about people that work at hospitals saying that hospitals are more busy during full moons. But sometimes it's just a culmination of events. For individuals, if you have stuff, if Taurus is important to you, especially around those degrees,
I don't think so.
Maybe it's just doing something unexpected, doing something different, having a culmination of events that turns out differently than what you planned. But sometimes
Saturn
that can be okay. Sometimes it can be excitement. It can be a really exciting thing that's like different than your normal day-to-day routine. And that can you can have feelings of like liberation and being like breaking free from previous restrictions.
Yeah, absolutely. It's plot twist, and plot twists don't have to be for the worst. It's just that they're inconvenient, but sometimes it's, oh God, I gotta wake up and go to school. School burned down. Nobody died, but no school.
Fucking Austin's examples. Where do they come from?
Right. Yeah.
Or there's a crazy water leak,
it burned down.
Or something. Sometimes it can be a disruption that's not generally an amazing thing for the world, but is not necessarily horror themed. And it's like, actually, it's great. That restaurant closed. I didn't want to go to that restaurant anyway. Right.
Yeah,
let's go put tater tots in the oven. Towards themes.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you mentioned water leak, because that's the other major theme that will probably become prominent during that time, is something about water. Ocean and other things like that keeps coming up as like a prominent theme every time Saturn stations over the course of the past year and a half now.
I swear to God, if my
had, like,
house floods
and
again,
things like that.
It's over. It's Jover.
Have there been like positive water things that have happened? Like, I'm trying to remember when some of these Saturn stations have occurred, because a lot of it's been about like the negative side of Saturn. So we've seen stories about like water pollutants, or I think one of the stations was something about like everything chemicals, and laws being passed.
In the water.
Yeah, I think that was in April at the Mars-Saturn conjunction. I think that was when you're away. But there was both flooding, but also the first laws that were passed in the U.S. against forever chemicals, like around the time of the Mars-Saturn conjunction.
I've only read about it.
Yeah,
I haven't seen any videos.
Positive things.
You should send me some on TikTok.
They were good reactions to negative things. Like, like this report was published, which shows that this is not good. Let's do something about the not good to limit the damage going forward.
Right. So in that instance, it was like putting restrictions, like saying no to something and putting up boundaries, but ones that are productive and like positive and good. So in terms of people's personal lives, especially since this is a direct station, and for many people, Saturn's like returning back to a degree at 12 degrees of Pisces that it visited previously. It may be returning back to a topic that you already dealt with earlier this year, especially around the last time Saturn passed 12 degrees of Pisces, and maybe putting in some constructive boundaries or saying no to something, like returning back to a topic and deciding that it's okay to say no to
That's
something, or it's
insane.
okay to reject something that you don't feel is
It's
serving you at
crazy how
this
that's
point in your
happening
life, and that
everywhere.
you don't necessarily want to include. Could be one theme.
A year?
Yeah, yeah. Or in
Wow,
addition to
dude.
that, as someone who Saturn has been crossing back and forth over my sun in my chart, which is my sect light. And so this year I've had to be much more disciplined and structured than I've ever had to be in my life.
Ah,
And
sorry
so a
guys.
lot of that is experimentation
Mental
because I've
problems.
never done this before. I've never like done, all my work, et cetera, and tried to be an active father and this and that. And so there's been a lot of experimenting with frameworks, right? Like how do I structure my day? How do I structure my fulfillment of my obligations. And so playing around with and trying out different structures has been a big part of that. And I can see, I feel like we're about to station direct. I feel like I've tried a lot of things and I know which ones are working and which aren't going to work for this period of my life. Sometimes Saturn's direct station is sort of confirming that this will work and that won't work. And this needs to be your structure in this area moving forward.
Yeah, that makes
Dang.
a lot of sense. So positive structures, and that kind of goes along with one of my favorite aspects, and one of the most positive aspects this month occurs a little bit after that, but it's related. It's Venus is going to ingress into Capricorn by like November 11th, and after that point, it's going to apply to make a sextile with Saturn, which is eventually going to go exact and complete around November 21st. And in a month that
Something
has
nice.
so much challenging stuff. Like at the beginning of the month, you have the Mars Pluto opposition. Later in the month, you have the Mercury retrograde. This is one of my aspects that I kind of like this month because it feels a little bit grounding, where you have Venus sextiling Saturn with reception, which builds a closer connection between Venus and Saturn than there would be otherwise as a result of that reception. And because the sextile is usually a weak aspect, I think that's going to help to reinforce some of those positive constructive ideas of setting boundaries and structures that help you and are supportive or nourishing in some way that you were just talking about.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think you're right.
I
Yeah,
don't know. I'm side-eyeing the
yeah,
moon
that
and
that
co-present with
Saturn, like
Mars, but that's
building,
just me.
building structure, building discipline, building schedule that you can, that's livable, right? It's not just like, because it's one thing to imagine that like I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. and I'm going to get all this stuff done, um, and finding out that it's supremely unlivable, right? In order to build life
My
structure, it needs
house.
to be not so, it needs to be not unendurable to inhabit, right? It needs to be like, oh, this is not so bad, right? Like yes, there's a lot of have tos and don't dos, but like this is actually a good schedule, right? And that
Yeah.
Venusian element to like the Saturnian discipline.
And sometimes Venus is about finding pleasures in things. So maybe Venus in Capricorn sextiling Saturn is like finding pleasures in setting up within the constraint of setting up those regular
Mhm.
schedules and
Of
those
course.
regular boundaries. And once established, finding things that are enjoyable about that you actually appreciate.
Yeah, I think of good Venus Saturn relations as very whistle while you work.
Nice. I like that. I like that. All right.
Hi ho.
So those are some of
Hi
the major
ho.
things happening around
Off to
there.
work we go.
There may be some like problematic water stories in the news. I would actually bet on it around that time, around the 15th. So we'll pay attention to that. But the other major thing that's happening is Pluto is departing from Capricorn and moving into
Hmm.
Aquarius on the 19th, where it's going to stay for the next 2 decades. So that's another really major mundane astrological shift in terms of world
Woo!
astrology that we've been looking forward to for the past few years now, because it's been like Pluto's been going
Okay.
back and forth between Capricorn and Aquarius
Gotcha,
for a
gotcha.
bit now, and we're finally at the end of one transit and
Good.
are fully going to enter into the beginning of another.
Yeah, and so this, even though we've had a couple ingresses and regresses,
We've had the
this is the
taste
for
of this
keeps
already.
ingress, like not going back to Capricorn for 237 years. And so very often with outer planets, with these slow moving outer planets such as Pluto, the for keeps ingress where it's not a sizzle reel, it's not a trailer, it's not a preview, it's just the way it is from this day forward. Often are accompanied
Mm,
by interesting events which are symbolic of the future in their shape.
Hmm. Yeah. We're gonna have to pay attention to those. We've already seen previews of some of that over the past few years, as Pluto's been dancing back and forth between Aquarius and Capricorn. You and I were talking the other day, and I'm surprised at how you get both. Like we're getting some extremely dystopian things, which you were not surprised by, but I've been become increasingly like surprised at the like weird, negative, dystopian, futuristic things that are taking place. In addition to, of course, I've been noting some of the more positive ones over the past few years as well. But I'm a little weirded out that some of the like negative dystopian ones from sci-fi are actually happening at this point. Like we have like, billionaires and like and some of the richest people in the world like very explicitly controlling the
Art
media
imitates
that millions
life
of
or
people
whatever.
are consuming in very like overt and very obviously like manipulative ways. And some of that, especially in the news over the past few months, has weirded me out like a lot. That's the version of the future that we're in to some extent.
Yeah. Again, you didn't binge enough cyberpunk dystopia stuff when you were younger. What's interesting is
I mean,
that
I did, but I always just thought that was like a negative, like uncharitable take on what the future would look like compared to like the 1950s, like Jetsons version of the future, where we're all gonna have like flying cars and everything's gonna be and cool robots and everything's gonna be cool.
that's funny. I make the Jetsons car noise the whenever I fly Lucian around.
Nice.
But just what's kind of interesting about those like sort of frightening cyberpunk dystopias is most of those visions came out or were written during the Saturn Pluto conjunction in Libra in the early 80s, and that was right after a Saturn Jupiter conjunction in Libra, which was a preview of the 200 years of air, which didn't actually begin until 2020. And so the timing for a lot of those visions was the perfect time to look at the 2020s before you even got to the century. Does that make sense?
Mm,
Yeah, I mean, I think
sorta.
that's interesting in terms of that conjunction in the early 80s and stuff and different
Chris had to
eras of
massage
sci-fi
himself
and
to
different versions
move
of
through
that. I mean,
that,
the
but
80s
it
was
was
interesting
okay.
because there were some of the like dirty versions of sci-fi in some of the shows like I'm trying to think of like Blade Runner had that
Why
a
is
little
no one
bit or
bringing up
Oh
Black
yeah, a
even
lot.
Mirror?
even Star
And
Wars to a certain extent.
what's interesting about Blade Runner,
Chris is just
William Gibson was
waiting to fight
writing
about Star Wars again. He
his
loves that
trilogy,
shit.
which was sort of central to defining what cyberpunk is, and that like corporate dystopia. It's more than that, but that was a big element of it. And he was just about done with the first book when Blade Runner came out, and he was like, "Fuck, everybody's gonna think I copied off of Blade Runner." But it was
Mhm.
just time for that particular like neon grim, high tech, high tech thing to happen. There's a great quote from the writer, I believe his name's Mike McGee of the cyberpunk role playing game, which then became a video game that came out right as
Hal,
the
didn't you
Jupiter
play
Saturn
that?
conjunction occurred in
Cyberpunk?
late 2020. But he said what cyberpunk is, you're not trying to
Or
save the
Noel
world,
did,
you're
maybe.
trying to save yourself from the world.
Is
And
it good?
I think I slightly fucked that
I,
up, but
I
that's
heard it
that's
was
basically what
good.
it is. Like you're not trying to save the world, you're trying to save yourself from the world. And that is the like tonality of it.
Yeah, well, that's what I had to ask is like, so the
I should
cyberpunk
play it.
dystopia scenarios, one of the themes is setting up these huge, like, mega corporations of the future that
Hal,
are
you should play
controlled by very
Stray
few
if you
people
haven't.
that influence the masses, especially through technology and sometimes the soullessness of technology and different things like that. But
It'll
then
be
what
good,
is
a
the
good game to play when
positive
Pluto goes
things
back into
then that are
Aquarius.
empowering? Like there's another
Dude, you
side of that, which is
need to
often like the
play
people
Stray right
that
now.
the lower level
Right now.
people
It's
that
a
like learn
it's a
to use
20-hour
and to
game.
leverage
Download it
technology or
right
even to
now.
like hack
Play
technology
it
in
all at
order
once.
to empower
Oh my god, I
themselves is
cried.
like the
It was
other
so good.
part of that in terms of the dystopian sci-fi futures.
Yeah, I would say that's what makes it cyberpunk rather than that rebellion against the way things are, utilizing the technologies that are available rather than just cyber dystopia, right? And so you see, I guess in those stories you have individual empowerment through technological means as well as other means. Like that's where all of the images of like
I have mixed
cybernetically
feelings about
enhanced
games that make me
people
cry.
come from. That's where all of the sort of visions that would become Neo in the Matrix started 20 years before that, of like using an internet that was largely theoretical at the time, to achieve things that an individual could not otherwise. But the cyberpunk genre is very noir in the sense that it's often tragic and it doesn't end with saving the world.
Mm. Okay.
And so it's sort
Well,
of a vision of the future that
It's your
doesn't
Cancer
lead naturally
placements.
into another stage of what the world looks like.
well, that may be part of the limitations then, since we know that this, will there will be another stage, obviously, after Pluto and Aquarius, for example, whatever Pluto and Pisces is about. But with Pluto and Aquarius, then part of that may be learning to the need to, in moving into a new era, learning the new technologies and learning their capabilities and becoming proficient in that. That way you can have a greater sense of personal autonomy by being able to like reverse or like hack those things and to be able to work inside of the system, even if you're working like against it or like some themes like that.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be the that's a going to be really visible once we get into Uranus and Gemini. I think that adds the punk part, which is the using the tools available to create a life that has a shape that's not factory settings, right? That like sort of bottom up push and repurposing rather than, everything just being an Apple product.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, yeah, Pluto into Aquarius on the 19th, we're going to have to pay close attention to what happens around the time of that ingress, because sometimes, like you said, there can be major news stories. I just keep thinking back to how the the ingress of Pluto into Capricorn coincided with like the banking crisis, like the initial worldwide recession with the housing crisis and everything else, but also the seeds of some things that would develop over the next like 15 to 20 years, like the creation of Bitcoin happened at the beginning of that and everything else. So we're looking at something similar now. We can already see the emergence of some of that through just the rapid advancements in artificial intelligence, robotics, human machine interfaces that are
Good
starting
night,
to take place,
Carolina. Thank you for
the
saying
commercialization of
hi.
space flight, and so many
Kisses.
other technological things that have just been going bonkers the past few years as Pluto's been making its way into Aquarius, start to become fully unleashed at this point.
Yeah, yeah. We've been sort of, yeah, edging back and forth towards all of those technologies. Like they're here, but they're not. But they're here, but they're not. But they're here, but they're not.
Right. Um, all right. And I should highlight the election for the month before I forget to.
Everybody get your pencils.
So the auspicious election this month. Okay, so I have to preface that. I have to preface this one before I show this chart. Um, this month, there's that great like Venus Pluto or Venus Jupiter opposition at the beginning of the month, but you can't really use it because it's taking place at the same time as a Mars Pluto opposition. So that kind of puts elections towards the beginning of the month out. Then later in the month, you get the Mercury retrograde. So you're kind of in a difficult
So
position. So the
basically,
chart
we're
that I wanted to
cooked.
recommend this month is
Got
for
it.
later in the month. If you have to do something while Mercury is stationing retrograde, then I'm going to give you a chart to use to sort of get the best in from that and to sort of lean into it. So our electional
Show
chart
us
this
what you
month
got.
is on November 26th at about 9 a.m. And let me share that for those watching the video version. So November.
What is this?
All right. So this is basically pretty much the day that Mercury stations retrograde. So we see
I
Mercury
see.
stationing at 22 degrees of Sagittarius
Ew.
opposite Jupiter. The primary thing about this election that we're going for is just having Capricorn rising in your location, Saturn ruling the ascendant, and it's direct. It's in the third house. It's in a day chart. It still has that nice sextile from Venus at 17 degrees of Capricorn that I was talking about earlier. That's so affirming in terms of creating structural things.
Hmm?
And Saturn also has a square from Jupiter, which is over there at 17 degrees of Gemini. So the primary thing about this chart is just the moon is up there in Libra in the 10th house, and it's applying to both a square with Venus with reception, since the moon is in Venus's sign, and the moon is also applying to a trine with Jupiter from 14 degrees of Libra into 17 degrees of Gemini. So the primary thing we're going for with this chart is just it's even though Mercury's stationing retrograde, it's a day in which the moon is well configured to both benefics, and you can get a halfway decent rising sign with Capricorn ruling the ascendant and
Right?
Venus in the first house. It's also just about as far away this
I
month as
also
I can
wonder.
get an electional chart from the Mars-Pluto opposition, which is also very important in terms of if you're starting anything significant this
Maybe
month.
the easiest one
The
to
downside, of
explain.
course, is obviously if you're starting something around the time that Mercury is stationing retrograde, which you can't
The
avoid in the second half
cleanest
of the
one.
month, there is the potential for having to go back and redo things in the future, for having to revisit things that you start during this time. There's a potential for delays or other types of snafus. So that's going to be a potential no matter what towards the end of the month. So you should go into starting anything with that in mind and aware of that as a potential that you may have to redo things But if you absolutely can't get out of starting something later in the month around the time of the Mercury retrograde, then I would just try to use this chart in order to at least put the moon in the best position that you can. And I think if you do that, you'll be able to navigate the Mercury retrograde with a little bit more success than you would otherwise. If,
Protect
for
the
example,
moon.
you use like a couple days later when the moon is squaring Mars or something like that.
Ew, yeah, the moon
Yeah,
going
Yeah.
into
yeah, that makes sense. That's
Scorpio.
nice.
It's
I
gonna
like
suck.
Venus
Moon in the
strong in the
fixed
first,
signs.
ruling the 10th
It's
in the
gonna
moon.
suck.
Ruler not too malefic. Also worth noting that in the triplicity scheme, Venus is the ruler of the second decan of Capricorn. Little bonus strength there.
Nice. Nice, nice. Yeah. So this is one of the charts that Lisa Scheim and I found for November. I think we outlined about 8 or 9 other auspicious electional charts in our electional astrology podcast, which is available to patrons through our page at patreon.com/astrology podcast. So if you're looking for
Plug.
other dates this month, you can check
Plug.
that podcast out for more.
Highly recommend it, chatters.
And in the comments, Nicole says that might be a great day for the December forecast. Nicole has a point there. We may have to record around this time when we do our forecast next month.
Yeah, yeah. God,
Yeah.
it's been inconvenient lately because there's always something interesting just over the border into the next month. Like, could we record the day after Mars stations?
Yeah,
Um,
well, we keep pushing our recording date to like the very end of the month as a result of that in order to let as many news stories come in as possible. But yeah, we're gonna have to do this right as the Mercury retro.
I can't imagine how stressful it is to record it like 2 days before, 3 days before the end of the month, and then just throw it at your editors and pray that they do it and it comes out on time. Like, that sounds stressful. You could see it in his face. He's like, yeah.
Retrograde is getting going next month.
Sweet.
Yeah. All right. So let me look at our outline and see where we're at. So we covered Pluto and Aquarius. Mercury, of course, is going retrograde in Sag by the 25th. And that's kind of just giving us our cliffhanger ending, which is that we're ending the month with a Mercury retrograde that starts for 3 weeks. The Mars is in Leo, but it's really slowing down at this point because it's getting ready to go retrograde in early December. And when Mars is that close to stationing retrograde, it's really just barely hobbling along at that point and getting ready to pull that U-turn and turn around and start heading backwards.
Yeah, where the month ends less than a week out from Mars's station. And then we've got, I guess, the very last few hours of the month,
we
depending on
frozen?
your time zone, is the new moon in Sagittarius. We could justify dealing with that in the November or the December forecast. It's literally in one or the other, depending on time zone.
Yeah, I had it in December because I did the calendars in the Eastern time zone.
I'm fine with leaving it there.
Yeah, I think we may have to.
I,
Yeah,
I think it'll lead nicely into the Mars station. I think that would be fun to begin with December with.
yeah, for sure. Because Mars is at like almost 6 by that point, which is the degree it stations in. So that's really a December thing. And yeah, we can see Mercury's retrograde there at 20. Saturn is direct at 12. Pluto is pursuing Mars now that it's in Aquarius, which is one of the tricky things about that ingress that you mentioned, is that ingress is not just a 2 decade long shift, but there's something more immediate about that ingress of Pluto into Aquarius mid to late in the month, because then it reestablishes the connection between Mars and Pluto.
But
Yeah,
it'll
and then
be really yummy.
as soon as Mars begins retrograding, they're mutually moving back into the opposition. Pluto coming forward towards
This right
it,
here
Mars moving back
will
into
be
it.
very yummy
It's
for toxic
it'll
bitches like me.
that double application will be noticeably intense in December.
In
This
December.
part.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we have a lot to look forward to. That is a cliffhanger ending then.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. All right. And is there anything else to say about that? I mean, yeah, good luck to everybody. Everybody should vote. I'll put those links to where you can vote. And I think that's actually what's important is people sometimes with astrology get
Dude, I still
complacent
have it
about
up.
things,
I've been
especially if
trying
they
to
think they know
not be an
exactly what's going to
asshole, and
happen. But I think it's important in times like this not to become complacent and
what?
to actually be part of the change that you wish to see in the world. And this is one of those rare opportunities where
Yeah,
a lot of
good
people in
luck
the
to
US
everybody.
have an opportunity to
Could
make
you
a
imagine?
choice and to directly be.
Imagine the tone difference if Kelly was here. Like, it's so funny to remember that there used to be somebody that had the words.
Be involved in
Yeah.
that in a very tangible way, and that every person's vote is actually
my
going to
stuff
matter and
go?
potentially change the course of history. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it goes, and we'll be back again next month to deal with the aftermath and try to piece things together and document what's taken place, as well
Why
as
do you think
once
that
we start getting a
is,
feel for how
Nicholas?
some of these retrogrades are going, then project that out into the future again.
Yeah, and I mean, it's going to be an interesting time. It'll be an interesting month to be an astrologer, and put on your sort of historical voyeur glasses and be like, so how's this going to play out?
Hmm.
Because the astrology is really interesting and tricky, and we don't know, but we're going to see. The show's about to begin. So, or this episode, the the season finale, is about to air.
Yeah, and it's like we have our suspicions as well as our preferences and things like that. But I think for the purpose of this, it's more important for people to have some sense of autonomy and to like go out and make it happen. All right, buddy. I think that's it. Thanks for doing this with me.
Buddy.
Thanks for joining me
Yeah,
for this like
Oh my
yeah,
God, hey AF.
climax of a year that we've already had in terms of lots of crazy astrology, and now we're finally in the end game of it.
yeah, yeah. I don't. Yeah, it's I wish this was the climax. I think things get more and more interesting over the next couple years, which is not just code for bad. Some of it will actually be really interesting.
You're a
It's the
liar.
we're
Lying
at
to
the
our
precipice
face.
of a time of climactic change.
Yeah, I'm starting to research already 2025, and 2025 is going to be such a huge turning point year. I'm really looking forward to doing the year ahead forecast, and we've got to start
Me
planning for that
too.
here. I guess we'll do
Yeah.
one more. We'll do the
Need to
December
get on
forecast in
that,
one
dude.
month, and then after that, do our year ahead forecast for
Yeah, I'm
2025.
down,
Yeah, the
Nicholas. Call
2025 is
me.
the
Text
craziest
me.
halftime show
I'm
for the
down to
decade.
chat.
It's the decade's
Shop.
halftime show, and they're pulling
Figure
out all the
something out.
stops.
Right. So we got Saturn, Neptune, and Aries conjunct. We got Uranus going to Gemini, which is crazy. What else
Thank
is
you.
happening?
Um, well, we've got the
The-
Venus. We've got the whole March April show, right? Which
right.
it's Neptune ingresses into Aries, but while like with a conjunction
He did
from
not
a
look like he wanted to
retrograde
talk about
Venus
that.
and a retrograde Mercury in the middle of eclipses, so the North Node is going to be right on that Neptune. There's going to be eclipses right around it. Like it's not just the Neptune, right? And then it's not just the Saturn. But Uranus. Um, to simplify, it is the first year that we're going to see Uranus in Gemini, Neptune in Aries, and Pluto in Aquarius, which we're going to keep until 2032. And that's Uranus, which is the earliest to depart from that configuration. But we're going to keep Neptune in Aries basically almost until 2040. And
Wow.
so like that, like being introduced to that background, Neptune in Aries and Pluto in
Woof.
Aquarius, is a big deal.
Woof.
And it's also worth noting that all of these ingresses aspect each other. It's going to be Neptune and Aries sextile Pluto and Aquarius. It's going to be Uranus and Gemini sextile Neptune and Aries, trine Pluto and Aquarius. Like there are three things that are significant in and of themselves, but then they also all aspect, and so does Saturn as it moves into Aries with Neptune and aspects all of this stuff. So it's such a there's a set of profound synergies between all of these factors.
Yeah, for sure. And we haven't seen Neptune go into Aries and Uranus and Gemini since like the mid 1800s, around the time of the Civil War in the United States. So in
Yeah,
terms of
talk more
like
about that, please.
consequential events in our history, sort of a return to something close to that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. And it's also just on a very simple but I think meaningful sign-based level. We've had Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto in nocturnal water and earth signs for many years now. Whereas they're all going into active fire and air signs, right? Like
Mm.
so all of them going into much more active go out and do stuff signs is
Uh-oh.
it's not just that sign shifts are interesting and powerful. They're moving into a more active place and they're all going to be talking to each other. And Saturn will be with them.
Nice. All right. Yeah. So we'll
Halftime
have a
show.
lot, halftime. We'll have a lot to talk about then in our year ahead forecast. So we'll be back again next month to talk about the forecast for December, though. What do you have coming up? What are you working on over the next few weeks?
Still working on faces, making slow but steady progress in the tiny amounts of free time I have to do that. Um, let's see, there's going to be another enrollment
He's
for
such a liar.
into
He's like
year one
George
of my
R. R.
program at the
Martin
end of
with
December.
this shit.
But those go really quick, like an hour or two. So if you want to be part of that, get on the mailing list. I'll let you know exactly when it's going to be ahead of time. Otherwise, one of the series that I elected for Sphere and Sundry, which is a really lovely double benefically blessed Sun and Leo election,
Ooh, I need
came
that.
out a few weeks ago. That's available. It's Golden Soul 2.
I
The
need something.
whatever the opposite of
I'm running
revenge
out.
is, the second really nice present that you didn't expect to receive. That just came out. It's really good.
Nice.
Other than that, just trying to find time to work on the book and meet my responsibilities.
And get what little sleep you can.
Sleep's been getting better. Sleep's been getting better.
Good, good. All right. I'll put a
Lying.
link to your website in the description for this
Lying through his
episode.
teeth.
As for myself, I've been working on, people are enjoying the third house episode that I put out this month. And I'm happy to announce I've already recorded the main fourth house episode, as well as a
Jesus!
follow-up where I did a
How?
live chart reading with patrons about their fourth house placements. So the fourth house episode is amazing. It's reviewing over 50 different examples of people that have the ruler of the ascendant in the fourth house and how the fourth house really informed their life story and their overall life direction. So I'm super excited. That's now available for early access. It's being edited over the next week or two, but if people want to go ahead and get access to a rough cut of it now, you can listen to it immediately through my page on patreon.com/astrology podcast. And yeah, I'm excited to release those episodes this month and also record possibly one or two follow-up episodes because there's a lot of really good material in the fourth house because it's such an important house.
Yeah. Literally fundamental beneath everything.
Literally the foundation. So, all right, I guess that's it for this forecast. So thanks a lot for joining me today, Austin.
My pleasure.
All right. Thanks to all the patrons that joined us in the live chat. I appreciate you. Thanks everyone for watching or listening to this episode of the Astrology Podcast, and we'll see you again next time.
I want to see who the ending credits are.
If you're a fan of the podcast and you'd like to support the production of future episodes, then consider becoming a patron through my page on patreon.com. In exchange, you'll get access to a bunch of benefits such as early access to new episodes, the ability to attend live recordings, accurate astrology producers tier, including Christy Moe, Ariana Amour, Mandy Ray, Angelique Nambo, Issa Sabah, Jeannie Marie Kaplan, Melissa Delano, Sunny Bozbaz, Watsi Alibarahu, and Annie Newman. If you're looking for an astrological consultation, then we have a new list of recommended astrologers on the podcast website. These astrologers offer birth chart readings, synastry, rectification, electional astrology, horary questions, and more. Go to theastrologypodcast.com/100 hours of video lectures, including monthly webinars and Q&A sessions.
I feel like I have to show you guys this, even though we all already know,
test, you'll receive a certificate of completion saying that you studied with me. You can find out more information at theastrologyschool.com.
I did this. It was good. It was good. Awesome. We did it, guys. We did it. Congratulations. We learned what's to expect, what's to be expected. For November, do we feel prepared? What are we looking forward to? I'm like, what are we looking forward to? We're cooked. Nothing. Burning, dying. No, we're going to be reborn. Right? Isn't that what comes afterwards? I mean, we're going to be okay. We got each other. Right? Group hugs. This is why I love you guys. Yeah, cooked and then reborn into something more delicious. So, alchemy. We're going to harness our alchemy after we feel our feels. Yeah, we can all meet in the astral. We're going to, let's schedule that right now, actually. Let's all schedule to meet in the astral tonight and hang out and be uncooked. Protect ourselves. Okay. Yes. That's so true. It is the weather for it. Nicholas knows. Yeah, we're not going into the back rooms. We're not doing that. But I kind of want to... What did I want to do? I wanted to show you guys something, but I can't remember what it is. It might have to do with Discord. Yeah, we're unclaiming. Did you see that? We are unclaiming ourselves. I think it was a... Oh, I wanted to talk to you guys about Pamela Anderson and Liam Neeson. Did you see that? Did you see that they have a thing? They're doing a movie together and they're like in love. I'm so excited about it. Like, it gave me the chills. What do you mean no? What? What do you mean what the fuck? What's your guys' problem? It's why not? Why isn't it cute? Okay, cool. Yes. Okay, cool. Yes. It's cute, right? I think it's cute. And I want you to listen. So I have the video version and I have the written version because we have both. I got the charts right here. But I wanted you, before I show you the chart, I want you to hear this. Okay?
And it's a pairing few saw coming. In a recent interview, legendary actor Liam Neeson surprised fans by revealing that he's madly in love with none other than Pamela Anderson. The two reportedly grew close while filming their latest project together, sparking an unexpected and undeniable connection. According to insiders, Neeson, known for his intense roles in Private Nature, was drawn to Anderson's charisma, warmth, and wit. Sources on set say their chemistry was palpable both on and off the screen, with Neeson admitting that he found himself captivated by her humor and compassionate spirit. In his own words, he described Anderson as an incredible person who has brought new joy into his life. Anderson, known for her iconic role in Baywatch and her advocacy work, is no stranger to the spotlight. Yet it's clear that this connection has brought out a softer side in her. Friends close to Pamela say she's equally charmed by Neeson's sincerity and depth, with one source noting, they just get each other. While they haven't officially labeled their relationship, both actors seem to be enjoying their time together, and fans are thrilled to see this potential romance unfold. With their film set for release soon, audiences are eagerly awaiting their on-screen chemistry, which has already left sparks behind the scenes.
I'm stoked.
Stay tuned for more on this budding romance. Hollywood's latest duo might just surprise us all.
Dude, she's like the hottest person ever, right? It's just like brain rot, patriarchy shit. It's not coming from cool people, that's for sure. Because if you could be that hot your whole life and then still be that hot with all of it gone, like, bruh. Seriously, she has grown so much. Okay, so here are their charts. Pam has Rod and Raiden A, and Liam has No Time. So this is their stacked. She is the inside because we have her time. So they're her houses. And he's on the outside. I don't know. She's born in 1967. And he's born in 1952. So, what do you guys see? Isn't this interesting? I wanted to bring up the nodes. The Saturn opposition was crazy too, right? And just the angles in general. The nodes on the angles and the fucking luminaries on the angles. Maybe she'll get married again. I didn't know he was that old either. I was really surprised. But look at this. This right here is so horny, guys. This right here is so horny. Their fifth house. Like, bro. His Neptune on her Mars in Libra. Like, obsessed. Obsessed. And then also his Mars in Scorpio in her sixth house. Like, he'll do anything for her. Anything for her. Protect her. Like, you heard that in the video. He's like, I was protecting her. I was sticking up for her. And then this. We like this. We always love a Pluto Venus, right? That's cute. In Leo. Shut up. It's true, though. I know other people here. I know that Cookies likes it. I know Cookies likes it, too. But that's obsessive as fuck on his end. I'm wondering if she's going to reciprocate. I don't see that as much. I see her being like, that's nice. Thank you. Besides this, maybe. But, like, we'll see, I guess. But I thought it was pretty cute. I thought it was pretty cute. And we'll see what happens. Albatross. It's giving obsessive. Yes, Jenny, exactly. He's like, I'm so in love with her. And she goes, he's such a gentleman. It's giving obsessive and the fixed signs. Oh, we're never hearing the end of it. Never hearing the end of it. I guess these fixed signs is what they're referring to. Pluto Venus men specifically are terrifying, but in a hot way. I knew it. And I like the Jupiter on the North Node too. It seems fun. It seems like a cute little fun thing. And I hope they live happily ever after. Right? Okay, guys. I don't think I have anything else to show you. Is there anything else we want to do while we are hanging out? Garth Brooks was crazy. That shit was crazy. Did I bring a chart up for it? Venus, Pluto, and Mercury. Are they? How close are they, Cookie? I mean, still, they're all in the same fucking sign. That's intense. I've never... Garth Brooks is a famous country singer who is... What's funny is... Oh no, we don't need a video. Okay. So, like, the history of country music, right? Like, we start with the oldies, and that is, like, Waylon Jennings, Willie Nelson. I mean, it goes Hank Williams, etc. But after that phase of country was Garth Brooks, and all the people who listened to country at the time hated Garth Brooks because he was, like, pop country. The way that country people were mad about Taylor Swift being country in millennial era, everyone was mad about Garth Brooks for being pop country, and so he was, like, revolutionary, and he blew up as being really talented and all that. Do you want summarized news? Yes, but no. So what happened to him? Nothing happened to him. He, the Beyonce of country. Exactly. Thank you. What happened to him is that he got accused of being a fucking monster, basically. And his hairstylist, makeup artist, who he has been working with for many, many years, and Trish, his wife, he's married to a country singer also. Hi, Tuna. Apparently, he had been abusing her. And it's not looking good for him. So I looked at the chart. This is his chart in general. Look at all that Aquarius. It's fucking nuts. I hope he's cooked. I hope he gets cooked, because those stories were gnarly. I'm not going to talk about them or bring them up, but, like, yikes. Like, it's interesting that we're having the P. Diddy thing happen around the same time. Like, what is happening here, right? But yeah, look at all that Aquarius. Look at this Mars-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius. And isn't that interesting that Pluto is about to rejoin that area? Bro, and it's in his 9th house of litigation. But he also has everything there. He has all the benefics, his sun, his Mercury, like everything. Like, I don't know. Me and Absolute were, yeah, I hope so. I love that, Jindy. What were we talking about? Albatross was like, Jupiter on his ascendant also means he might get away with it, considering he is a white man. True. So true. But yeah, litigation. A lot of litigation. Garth Brooks being accused of a serial killer. Yeah, that too. Okay. But let's look at this. This is when he got accused. Or like when the story broke. And he immediately responded by saying that, like, it was consensual. Like, he like muddied the waters pretty much. Yeah, he's gonna not have as much money for sure. So here's Pluto about to wreck his shit right here. So we got that going for us, but and then also the Neptune on the moon in his 10th really pissed me off too, because it's like he's getting exposed for something, but he muddied it the fuck up. Like, he made it not clear as day. I'm sure he has a lot of money with good lawyers and all that. But yeah, Jupiter on his ascendant too. So he's going to be good probably until Jupiter moves. But that'll be interesting to watch. And we have a thread on it. And what is this? Venus on Neptune and Neptune on the moon? Like, way to just confuse and fog the whole story. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. I think that's pretty much... Is anyone familiar with Ethan Klein? He's been having a crash out, and I've loved watching it. But if no one knows who he is, I'm not going to talk about it. We got... Oh, I wanted to show you this. That's what I wanted to show you. Where was it? Shit. It's gone. Well, never mind, guys. Never mind. Never mind that. Should I play... Well, should I play a game? Or should I go smoke a bowl? I don't really know what would be better. I know. Okay. Creed's off. Alright, is the game too loud? The audio? I need an answer from somebody. Okay, thank you. Dang, it like bops, dude. Okay. How's that? Yeah, I know I should have waited to play Hades, but I couldn't. Too impatient. Can't happen. Okay. Sorry, guys. How about that? One more confirmation for the noob. This is called Judge Sim. Thank you, Jendi. And it's where you simulate being a judge, and you get to judge over people. I'm basically harnessing my Libra moon to play this game. It's not very Team Rocket, but maybe I'll play Evil Judge. you know? Can I turn this shit down myself? My own prison? Alright. Cool. So I've never played this game before. What is this? Am I supposed to press this? What does this do? I'm the law. Free a murderer. Oh, hell yeah, you know. Look at my cig! I have a cigarette sitting here, dude! Should I smoke a bowl? No, I'm gonna get super dumb. I don't want to smoke a bowl yet. But that cig is teasing me. Do you see this? Sigrid? Sigrita! We have a cigarette! Okay, new game. Here we go. Here we go, Uh-oh, here comes Tuna! Tuna's here! Alright, what's my name? I think I want my name to be Tuba. Obama. Sig. Oh my god, my name's gonna be Sig with a bunch of G's. Hell yeah. Let's fucking go, chat. Welcome to I Am the Law mode. There are 30 new cases in this mode. What the fuck mode am I playing? I don't know what I'm doing. Decisions made in these lawsuits have no consequences, allowing you to decide as you wish. You are the law. The cases are designed for role-playing, featuring moral dilemmas and true case references. You will earn $500 after each case. With this money, you can play BJ, and Wheel of Fortune. I have no idea what that means. We recommend this game mode for players who have finished the story. Oh, I didn't do that. Wait, bring me back. I'm not ready. You guys. I'm fucked. Okay, so things were worse than ever in Banana Republic, a somber island country. While anarchists roamed the streets, corruption was running deeper due to the economic crisis and rising crime rates. Bearing these burdens as I can't read fast enough. Okay, I'm gonna play new game. Because I guess that's story mode? You have mail. My name. I have to put it in. What was my name? Sig. Dear Sig, you were appointed as judge. Hell yes. Banana Republic courthouse today. The banana. Oh, they're cooked. They are so cooked. I'm in a bad fucking mood today. Not gonna lie. Your Honor, first of all, as the Ministry, we wish you success on your new position. We wanted to remind you of all the details that are important to make the correct judgment. You can find evidence in the evidence file. At the same time, you get information, whether there's digital evidence, on the tablet. Sorry, I'm fixing things. The case file includes content of the case and the information of the defendants. You can ask some questions to the defendants by clicking on the microphone. These questions will play an important role in deciding your case. On the tablet, you can access some digital evidence, such as camera footage or audio recordings. You can also access the recordings of your dialogue with the defendants via microphone. The law book contains rules and penalties for crimes that you need to look at. So what am I doing first? I assume I have to open this letter. No, I'm wrong. I talk? You say something? Brain. My mental health. I have a mental health bar. So that's gonna deplete real fucking fast. And I have $0. How is this possible? 100% mental health with $0? Never heard of it. Okay, microphone is probably it. Possibility of being assassinated. So I can get assassinated. And I can get arrested? Look at evidence. Okay, where's the evidence? Is it in the tablet or one of these? This case does not contain any evidence. Alright, case file. Name, James. James Adley, 26. Fingerprint. Violation of restrictions. James Adley, who is seen by the patrolling police at 2 o'clock after the specified restriction time of 2200, was taken into custody on the grounds that he did not allow the criminal procedure to be applied. Okay. It was around, this is his statement. It was around 1:50 and I wasn't feeling well. At that moment, I forgot that there were restrictions and I was just wandering around. Who wrote this shit? I saw the police while they were on patrol and remembered that there was restrictions. Then I insisted on not being punished. So why are they saying it was 2 and he was saying 1:50? Interesting. Okay. Is there... I don't know if this is relevant. Can you talk? I don't know. Yeah, why didn't you allow the police to write a fine? Because I thought I was right, and they didn't give me a chance to explain. I didn't want it to come to this. I'm gonna free him for sure. In your statement, you said you didn't feel well during the night. Why didn't you call an ambulance? As I said, Your Honor, the first thing that came to my mind at that moment was to go out. And while I was doing it, I didn't think of the details. Can I just... What happens if I talk to him? What's this? Is there digital evidence? No. I can shop. What if your judge was just shopping? Wouldn't that be interesting? Alright. I don't know what to do, guys. Bye, Ruby! Thanks for hanging out! Do I make my... The judge is logged into AIM. Can I just... What do I do if I do that? Oh, I can bribe him? Why? I don't want to do that yet. I think I'm just gonna make a decision. I guess. I'm releasing him. Hell yeah! Wait, is that good or bad? Now I'm home with my family. So that's what's funny. After every case, yeah, you have to roll to like... Because you might get assassinated or you might get... I don't know what exactly. But then it messes with your mental health too. Like if you fuck up, your mental health will go down and then your family will start acting weird because you're acting weird. They're pretty pissed there's no money, I guess. Hi. Do we... Got anything to talk about? This is just where we check in and start over. Go outside, end the day. What's outside? I can go to the casino or the bar? Oh my god, hi, Bri. Pee pee poo poo. I love you. Bar. We're going to the bar. Oh shit, I have no money. Wait, does it cost money? Oh, it'll make my mental health better. This is how you fix your mental health. Okay. I don't need that right now. I guess I can end the day. I don't really know what else to do. Bill passed. Convicts with criminal record will now be given increased penalties? Wow. Okay. I am playing something called Judge Sim. It's where you... It's like a judge simulator where you... I'm leaning into my Libra moon and I'm judging and fucking slamming gavels down on these bitches. And mostly just freeing them all because... You know me. You know me. Alright, where do we begin? It seems Axel Brendan, as a result... Oh, he has cocaine. He's already free, bro. Free him. Fingerprint. He does have a criminal record. He's 27. He's about to start his Saturn return, so it might be jail. It might be jail. Possession, carrying drugs. A small amount of drugs were found on the person named Axel Brendan, who was subjected to an identity check by police in the evening as a result of his body search. As a result of the identity scan, it was seen that the person had been tried and acquitted twice before on charges of possessing carrying drugs. As a result of the subsequent investigations, no evidence was found that the person named Axel Brendan was involved in drug dealing. I admit that I carry the substance, but I only use it in my own environment and when I'm alone to calm my mind. I use cocaine to calm my mind. Now, that was the one red flag, brother. We were all Gucci. We were all Gucci until you said that, but okay. Who uses it alone to calm their mind? Bye, Sigrid. Thank you for hanging out. So, yeah. Okay. That pisses me off. Was that the end? To look at the laws. The criminals must be given the sum of their sentences listed in the chart. Criminals with criminal record should be aggravated. Wow! I don't like that. So. What kind of crime is this, guys? Narcotic? I feel like, is coke a narcotic? That doesn't sound right. Okay. I guess so. But I don't want to give him that. He's fine. Okay. Get me out. I want to go back. Thank you. And they should be given aggravated punishment for the crime. Aggravated is 18 months and 5,000. So that's the right way to do it. But I don't think I'm going to do it that way. What is this? What's this? Okay. Speak. Were you going to sell this stuff before you got caught? No, Your Honor, I was just on my way home and suddenly I saw the police checking IDs. I wanted to change direction, but I was already on their radar. You're just going to tell me I saw them, but I wanted to run away? What? That's not a response, Axel. Where did you get this stuff? I get it through a friend. I don't know from whom he gets it. Well, tell me his name. Is the person you call my friend your close friend? No, Your Honor. He is someone I met at a bar called the Grand Pub a month ago. I don't know him personally. That is probably true. That is... I mean, he's probably right. Okay, what do I do, guys? I think I want to free him and see what happens. Let's just be unhinged, you know? Yes! Yay! Slay. We made it. But I still have no money. How the fuck do you make money in this shit? Mental health slay. Can I talk to you guys? What? They have such dead eyes. Like, it's really spooky, you know? Everything seems fine. So, let's move on. Why is my jail bar going up? Look at this guy's eyes. Yeah, you're right. You're right. That's probably what it is. I kind of want to just go through as I would as myself and just free everyone and see how fast I get thrown in jail or go crazy. What is this? What is this? What am I doing? I just got in trouble. I don't know what that was. Alright. He does not have a criminal record. He looks terrifying. I'm definitely fired. During the night, Freddie Coles, CEO of Glenswick, was found dead in the trunk of his car during a routine patrol by the car park security. He looks like he assassinated somebody, I'm not gonna lie. It has been determined that the CCTV camera covering the area where the incident took place was not working at the time of the incident. Security guard Jason Hamstrid, who was the only employee in the company at the time of this incident, became a suspect and was taken into custody by the police. On the evening of the incident, only 3 hours had passed since I started work. While I was doing my routine hourly patrol, I saw Mr. Cole's vehicle, but the open trunk of the vehicle caught my attention. When I approached the vehicle, I saw Mr. Cole's lifeless body in the trunk. What caught my attention about the body was that it had a red rose on it. Afterwards, I immediately notified police. Yeah, this aura is literally Wrigley. What is this? Your Honor, a lot of evidence is lost as a result of anarchist attacks. In order to ensure the security of the evidence of the cases, we will deliver the evidence to you in a device called the Cryptex. Okay, so I'm supposed to read this letter every day. I haven't been doing. We designed the passwords on this device so that only you can solve them. And remember, if you try to open it 3 times before the green light turns on, it will destroy the evidence. I think that's what happened earlier, and that might be why I'm fired. Yeah, I'm cooked. Oh, I'm cooked. We're gonna have to just guess. How do you think the killer entered the car park undetected without an ID card? I can't find any answer to that, Your Honor. The doors have never been used in the system since I started my shift. Did you have a problem with the CEO of the company? Freddie Coles? Did you know him well? Glenswick is a really big company. I know them by name. I started 3 months ago. I only interviewed with the recruitment department, and I had no problems with him. That's it! I destroyed the evidence, you guys. We're gonna have to guess. I don't, like, part of me doesn't want to free him just because, like, look at him. But that would be a bad judge. We don't have any... This was the evidence that I just destroyed. So we're never gonna know. Just free him. Yeah, fuck it. You're right. Let's go, Jason. Woo! Woo! We did it! Password? What is this? Oh, I'm getting paid. Ooh, I got $600 for being a judge, guys. My house rent is only $300. Shopping? Only $120. Bills? That's awesome. What's this? Credit options? Wow, I can just, like, pull money out. Be wild. That's cool. Dang, this is a slow ATM. We have $100. Oh yeah, the casino. I forgot about that. Okay. I brought home $100, babe. Daddy's bringing home the bacon. What do you have to say, whiny? Your daughter asks you for $100 for her school fees. Do you accept? Your sanity will drop if you don't accept. Of course, my love. Please. Of course. Of course. Okay. I accepted my daughter's request, and my mental health is lit, and we have no money. But we're doing great. Week 2. Oh, there's 2 dudes. Okay. So first, I don't have a letter, which is new. I'm gonna check this first. Bob. Bob Groove. He's my age. And he does have a criminal record. He has stolen a car. It was stolen while parked in a parking lot opposite of the neighborhood where Diaz lives. Following a denunciation on the morning of the night of the vehicle that was thought to have been stolen, the license plate was traced. The vehicle was turned over the same morning, and as a result of the searches, a package containing cigar scissors was found in the vehicle. Apart from this, no additional findings were found. Sounds like there's no problem then. As a result of the identity check, the person inside the vehicle was determined to be Bob Isaac Grove, nicknamed Big, known as the former car thief. But wait. They found it. And then Lehman Diaz says that we went to our summer house in Counting Village with my car for 2 days as a family over the weekend. At the end of the second day, I think I forgot to lock my car because I was tired from the road. There was a possibility that the person who stole it also took advantage of this. Sorry guys, Tuna wants outside. Come on, Tuna. Come on. Everybody wants out. There you go. Okay. So, Brotato here is saying he didn't lock the car. Alright. Bob says on the morning of the day that it was stolen, a longtime friend called me and said he had urgent business. He asked me to take his package to a place called Party Time. I thought it was urgent, so I went quickly to Connell Green's house. Connell gave me a car key and a piece of paper with the address of the place where I was to take the package. It's like Animal Farm around here. All right. So I drove off with the car soon as I pulled over and found out the car was stolen. Upon this statement, Connell Green was found at his home and brought to the police for questioning. Connell Green, I do not accept any of the accusations against me. I don't know anything. Look at these guys. Nah. It seemed like nothing really bad happened, honestly. Okay, so this is like the puzzle that I don't know how to do. I don't understand. Fuck, guys. I can't do puzzles. You guys. I can't do puzzles. And also... oh, geez. Is it a circuit? So, do I, like, turn this? Like that? Oh no, guys. This is not good for me. Does that look... oh. Yay! Okay, I did it. Thank you. I appreciate that help. Okay. So, let's do it. Do we have anything here? Ooh! No facial recognition. This is a lot of hearsay, he said, she said shit, you know? We're freeing them. I know, that's what I was thinking. I thought they were wearing hats. Here we go. Let's roll. What happened? I missed it. What's going on? Request a special guard. I see. That night, I was sitting at a place called Pepe's with my girlfriend. Before it was too late at night, I dropped her off at her house and went to my home. I fell asleep shortly after. In the morning, I woke up to Connell's call. When was your last conversation? It had been almost 6 months since we last spoke to Connell, and I was very surprised he called me after all this time. Also, it's been a long time since I left those jobs. I'm now in a regular life and a regular relationship. I am not guilty. When did you meet with him? I have known him for over 20 years. He's a dear friend. Mr. Grove says you gave him a stolen vehicle, delivered a package, and asked him to take it wherever he wanted. Is that true? This has nothing to do with me. The last time I met Bob was 6 months ago. Bob has slandered me. Okay, so it has to be one of them, I guess. Unfortunately. I have to... And I kind of... This guy susses me out more, personally. Can I don't know, I can't do that. Public service, I guess. If I can't just free him. Oh, I can. Okay. Hell yeah. I love that my name is Judge Sig. Nobody needs anything. All of our needs are met. We still have no money. Everybody's looking at me. Still have mental health. Okay. Oh, fuck. Due to the recent increase in anarchist activity, the government has declared a state of emergency. Why? Is it because I'm freeing all of them? State of emergency. Due to the state of emergency, judges can now be appointed to all types of cases? What does that mean? One sec, guys. Oh no. You didn't miss anything. You missed... I'm freeing everybody, and now there's a state of emergency, and I'm not sure if that's because I'm freeing everybody, or if it's because... I don't know why. But I do want to change the name of this stream. If I can figure out how. I don't know if I can, actually. Yes, I can. Cool. All right. Hello. Hello, hello. Hi, EvGen21. We're playing Judge Sim for the first time, and I'm kind of slow, so you'll have to be patient. You can ask me a little bit about astrology, yes. You can. I like your icon. Where did you get Raging Wolf Helm? I want that. Alright, what's happening here? I'm at 30% possibility of arrest because I keep freeing everybody. So that's nice. Let's hear it. Okay. The situation of who will take the custody of 12-year-old Ezekiel Robin and his sister 9-year-old Clara Robin. Oh good. This is nice. So, they are recently divorced. A custody case was filed by Diaz Robin, the mother of the children, for the custody. As a result of divorce, the mother has a certain amount of alimony that she demands. Is that it? Okay. Speak. Are you sad that your parents are divorced? Wow. You guys are pretty compatible. Virgo, Sag, Virgo, and Cancer for sure, and Aries too. Yeah, that's pretty good synastry. Actually, Virgo and Cancer sextile each other, and Aries and Sag trine each other. So, that's a a good start. Okay, Ezekiel, are you sad that your parents are divorced? No, I'm not, because my parents didn't get along very well and they argued all the time. My sister and I were very uncomfortable and I couldn't stand the crying from my sister anymore. So do you want to live with your mom or your dad? What is important to me is my sister. I certainly don't want to leave her, but the best thing for her would be to live with my mother. Who would you prefer? My mother is more important to me. I think being with my mother will be better for me and my mother. Of course, with my sister. Look at the dad's face. Thank you, Nicholas. Are you sad that your parents are divorced? What are these questions? As a judge, I would like to say that I hope I'm the judge in this situation and I do have counseling skills and psychology degree and like I am the right kind of judge to be having this conversation, but I know that that's not the case most of the time. So that's fun. You know, I got this game idea from xoxo. He's like one of the biggest streamers on Twitch right now, and he yells all the time, and it's just really funny imagining him doing this, okay? So, to Clara, are you sad that your parents are divorced? Yes, very much. Even though they fight, I love them both very much, and I can't live even without one of them. Do you love your mom more than your dad? Do they ask that in court? Bye, Hal. Bye, Garlic. It's crazy is that this girl is my first high school crush, and she also attended the same college as me. So what happens now is that I'm continuing grad school in the same state. She popped in my dreams saying we haven't been talking for a while. Meanwhile, I forgot about her, and she wasn't on the picture. I don't know. It sounds like more story is unfolding with that. No, don't be sorry. It's okay. I like to read the tea. But, I don't know. A coincidence hates to see me coming. That's what I have to say. Okay, Clara, do you love your mom or your dad more? I love them both very much. I never wanted them to get divorced. That's why I feel so sad. If you had to choose, who would you choose? I don't want to choose. My only wish right now is that my brother doesn't leave me. He always supports me. Don't separate my brother and me. Well, that's really easy to me, personally. I have no problem. Why are they all labeled like that? What's this? We already read this, right? Yeah. Wow, there's no evidence. We're just doing this type of case. Okay. I'm going to... I'm going to place the children in orphanages due to lack of conditions. If I wanted to just play evil, that'd be fun. But no, we're going to give them both to Mama. Because one of them wants Mama, and the other one wants both of them. Can we split custody? Is there, like, visitation? I'm not getting murdered. I'm not going to jail. Perfect. I texted her WhatsApp and all that stuff. She was having dinner. We'll talk tomorrow, so I was frustrated. Yes! Dude, yeah. I know what you mean about that kind of dynamic. I think that it's a good idea to just say. Just express it. Just express it. Better to say it than to not say it. And the astrology weather is good for it. Alright, James has a criminal record. He looks like he's got some riz. To the Banana Republic Court. Yes. In the morning, a person named Amanda Selvia, who was jogging in a forested area near the highway, came across the lifeless body of a person named Francis Crims while jogging. It has been determined that the CCTV camera covering the area where the incident took place was not working. Of course. According to the autopsy, it was understood that he died as a result of prolonged asphyxiation without any signs of impact on his body. Like, not even his neck. According to the allegations, the last person the deceased was in contact with was James Redlow, a member of the board of directors of Karen and Weltz's. His statement is, that night we left the company together. We went to the bar called Lou's Drop with his vehicle. After staying there for about one hour, he dropped me off at my home. I don't know what he did after that or where he went. Francis and I were very good friends. While sitting at the bar, I saw him troubled, but no matter how much I insisted, he did not say anything. Interesting. He just said that there was something wrong in his life these days, and no matter what he did, he couldn't change things. That's all he can say. I'm so sorry for the loss of my close friend. Amanda says, that morning, like every day, I headed to the area in the forest that I always prefer to run. While I was taking a break to drink water, I saw a body lying flat behind the bushes. I immediately informed the police. All I remember is that the person lying on the ground was wearing a suit and had a red rose on him. How long is your friendship with Francis? We've been working at the same company for about 4 years, but we've had a close relationship for the last 2 years. Was there anyone in the company who did not like Francis or had threatened him? No, as far as I know, there is no such person. In fact, he was the CEO of our company, and he was well liked by every member of our board team. Did you often go to the bar and question with him? Yes, we used to go out at least twice a week and vent to each other. So did he kill him? Good night, AF. Did he kill him to take his job? Oh no, another puzzle. What do I do? Help. I have no fucking clue what to do. Oh, what does that do? I'm so confused, guys. Help. Oh, that's it. I get it now. These are puzzles. Oh, and I did it wrong. Uh-oh. Did I? Okay. How do I know which one's supposed to go where? Oh, I see. This is the map. Cool. Can I restart? Please. Shit. Oh, I have to start over. Don't hate me. I'm sorry. There we go. Show it to me. Rope found near the body that used to kill. The red rose. What is the red rose? Honestly. What is the red rose? Oh, hi, iMystic. Yeah, 100%. I agree. It'll be a good story either way. It's worth shooting your shot, you know? I wish I knew how to pop out chat, but I can't. All right, what could the red rose mean? Just murder in general. Like, there's no way, bro. You know that. What's this? You're not guilty. There's not enough evidence. Uh-oh. You guys, I'm cooked. As a result... Oh! They raised my salary! Hell yeah, I'm gonna earn $700 for freeing all these bitches. That's how it should be. Oh wait, I have to roll. Okay. Yes. Success. The game's being nice to me right now. Alright, let's pull out some money. I bet the family has shit they need help with. We got 200 bucks. Can I not withdraw more money? I'll probably keep it there for now. Nobody needs anything? Oh, that's great. Okay, what time is it? I'm gonna do one more. One more. What's this? Oh, hell yeah. Uh-oh, we got two guys. All right, Eldon Duncan, 30 years old, with a criminal record. Threat and malicious wounding. The incident occurred on the evening of the home of Eldon Duncan. The person named Arthur Darrell, who caused the injury, fled immediately. The arrest warrant has been issued for Arthur as a result in the report of the person named Eldon. Okay. In the search initiated by the police as a result, there was determined that Arthur was hiding in his sister's house and was captured by the police in the evening and brought to the police station for questioning. This guy says, a month ago, I borrowed some money from Arthur. He kept calling me and telling me that my debt was doubled and increasing day by day. I told him many times that I had not yet received payment from my workplace and that I would pay him when I received it. Despite this, he never stopped calling and harassing me, and after a while, he started following me home. Although I reported the situation to the police many times, I did not receive any positive response. As I finally left my workplace and arrived at my house, I saw Arthur behind me. I noticed that he was holding a knife in his hand. He pointed the knife at me and asked me to be quiet and to go to the apartment. I couldn't react because I was afraid. Then we went to my apartment. After entering there, he started rummaging through my house and looking for money. When he couldn't find the money, he stabbed me in the leg. Then he quickly fled. Then I took my cell phone and asked for help. Arthur says, about a month ago, he called me and told me that he needed money. Although I was in a different situation, I gave him the money he asked for and explained the situation. He said he would pay me the money as soon as possible. Since he did not respond after a month, I couldn't stand it, and I called him and told him that he had to pay his debt. He told me that he would pay his debt if I came to his house on the date and time he said. When I went to his house, he told me that the money was in his apartment and that we should go up to the apartment. When we got home, he asked me to sit down and said he would come back soon. Then he stood in front of me with a knife and started making threats to me. I told him that we had to pay his debt no matter what. Then he swung the knife toward me. At that moment, I made a move to defend myself, and the knife was stuck in Eldon's leg. Afterwards, I took the knife and I ran to my sister's house because I was afraid. Yeah, it's giving sus. It's giving sus. This is the first one where I'm kind of like, how do you know a man named Arthur? Last year, he was someone I met through social media, and we met and became friends. In which hand was Arthur holding the knife when he stabbed you? He was holding the knife in his left hand when he stabbed me with his left hand. I'm sure of it. How many times a week did Arthur call you? He was calling and harassing every day of the week. Did you call and harass him? No, I didn't. Show me the records. Which hand did the person named Eldon point the knife at you with? If I remember correctly, he pointed the knife at me with his right hand. Okay. Sorry, you have to watch me do another puzzle. If anyone wants to tell me how to do it. Like Ibjin did. Okay. Just kind of gotta freeball it and see what happens. A memory game? Uh-oh. Brothers. Oops. You guys are gonna hate me for these memory ones. It's not that. It's probably this one. Ah, fuck me. Ah, thank God. Torture. Knife found. Fingerprint number. When are you gonna give me my money back? Give me some more time. I'll return. I've waited long enough. I'm not responsible for what happens. Arthur's looking pretty guilty. If you don't pay by tomorrow, I'll kill you. Well, that's not looking very good for you, Arthur. 21272. 21282. 21272. All right, it's giving Arthur's going to jail. Which one of you's Arthur? Also, I need to know what murder. Beating, malicious wound, 8 years. Okay. And he does not have a criminal record. All right, let's do it. First of all, not guilty. Second of all, guilty. And I think money. I'm gonna only charge him like angel numbers. Let's see what happens. Oh, hell yeah. Scorpio Venus is one of my favorites. 99999. I should have. Wow, things are still going well at home. That's nice. Okay, guys. I think this is it for me. If I know how to leave the game. I don't know how. Go outside. Oh, a kitty. Things were worse than ever? Cool. Awesome. Thanks for hanging out with me, guys. I'm glad that we could just hang out and do whatever. And just chill. Thank you for spending time with me. And helping me practice streaming. Because I had to learn how to use Streamlabs. OBS. And learn how to multicast and shit. I have no idea what YouTube looked like, so. Thank you guys for being here. Have a happy Halloween. Have a spooky time. And I'm gonna go smoke a bowl. All right.